Mic's on, if you would. I call to order the Rolesville Board of Commissioners work session. We're hosting the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board tonight. Appreciate the attendance from the advisory board. I do want to recognize you guys, and if you would, JG, if you want to be involved, if you want to, kind of introduce yourselves and kind of tell us maybe how long y'all been on the board, so we get to know you a little bit.
Make it easier, just go one by one for the voting. Look at me first.
The troublemaker.
Yeah, that's me. So I'm, hello board members. I'm Derek Verstegan. I am sitting on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board 4 years now, I think. I always get them mixed up because I was like filling in a spot and then got in. I've been doing that, and then I also sit on the Open Space and Greenway Committee. It's been fun getting to know a lot of this stuff and to know all you guys as well. So that's me, and I've been in Rolesville 6 years now, and one son out of Rolesville High and another one about to go in and one still in. So be here for a little while longer. So thank you for your time, and I'll go to the next one.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dick Armand. I've been on the board for over a year. I've lived in Rolesville since 2006, and I think I know everybody here, and it's a pleasure to see things move along in the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm sure I'm the least known of everybody in this room. I'm Dr. Muthana Al-Houri. I've been a member of this board for a month. I've lived in Rolesville for almost 5 years now. I have 2 sons and 2 daughters, 7 grandchildren. Well, I guess that's it, really. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Mary Kay Powers. I think I've been here longer than anybody except for Ronnie. Ronnie, how long have you been?
I moved here in '91.
So you do beat me for about almost 10 years. So I moved around 2000 and have been part of the Parks and Rec since almost the beginning. I have a park in my backyard, so it's important to me. So thank you everyone for having us tonight.
Thank you, Mary Kay.
Hello, I am Kevin Mazur. Been in Rolesville for 3.5 years, and I just started my 4th year on the board here. So not long after I moved to Rolesville, I decided to get involved and meet the people here. So so I'm excited about all the changes we've got in the future here in our town. So.
Well, thank you. And thank you for proudly displaying the NC State shirt there.
I didn't have time to go home.
Good evening. My name is Aaron Gallagher. I've been on the board now for 6 months, 4 months, something like that. Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Lived in Rolesville, about 4 years, and just really wanted to be part of the community and try to make a difference and voice opinions and support anyone I can to try to make this a better community. So appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. JG, do we have any missing that you may want to just give a quick intro to?
We do. We are missing one. It's our student board member, Abby Armstead. She's not able to attend tonight, but that would be our 7th member. So we have 6 of our 7 present tonight.
Good. Good. Good attendance then.
Yes, sir.
Very good attendance. Appreciate you guys coming out, and I think you're coming out to hear a presentation coming up shortly. I may just give you a few minutes, if anybody want to say anything after the presentation, after you hear it, I'll probably, allow you to do that. So, you're part of the group tonight, as much as the commissioners kind of hear firsthand from the work session here, the information we're going through. So thank you very much for coming out. Appreciate that. First item is a Cobblestone Community Center update. Michael, you going to kick that off?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Just real quickly, we have Rachel here tonight again with us with CPL, and she is going to provide kind of a recap of where we have been and where we are, and then also where we're going in terms of the design of the Cobblestone Community Center at Cobblestone Village. So I'll turn it over to Rachel and see if I can pull up her TV right here. CPL. All right. And then I'll let you kind of go through that, Rachel. And she first presented in September and then again in November. So this is her third time coming back to the board to provide an update.
Thank you all for having me back again. Glad you didn't kick me out after the first time. What we wanted to do is kind of give a comprehensive summary of where we've been, where we've come from, and kind of what those next steps are for this project as we finish this feasibility study for the community center. So taking you back to the beginning, we started with that visioning process. So we took a lot of the information that had been done in those previous comprehensive master plans, driving that forward because there was so much engagement that was done there, and taking some of the spaces that were requested through that engagement and through that visioning into the programming, into the design of this facility. When we looked at the program, we looked at the need for those community and athletic spaces. So that event gym space, that was a really high priority that came out of the master plan. The ability to have that kitchen, teaching classes, those multi-purpose rooms, storage spaces, space for staff, reception areas, all the support spaces that will generally go into a facility like this. And then those spaces up front, those general spaces. So the ability for this facility to be available for cultural enrichment, for pre-function, for gathering, not just for recreation, but really to serve the community at large with all of those different functions. We came to you with 2 different options for 2 different size facilities. Coming out of that first presentation, we moved forward with option A, and option A was the option that contained the full-size basketball court and the much larger event space. So again, that option A allows for a lot larger events to be held, for it to be used for some of those recreation needs with that full-size court, and then also has all of those other spaces that we mentioned. Looking at that, that was about 240 people seated with that facility. So moving that forward, we put together a conceptual design. So we looked at the available space on the site, the floor plan for that. On the right is that first floor. So again, showing how that space can be laid out in terms of event space needs with that seating at tables, the adjacent kitchen to be used, multi-purpose spaces that lead out into the open area. That's a part of the cobblestone development to tie into some of your events that you may host in that event space outside. On the second floor, the ability to look over into that gym or into that event space, see that from above, staff spaces, as well as a classroom that can be used for all kinds of fitness classes and holds, I think, sufficient numbers for what we're looking at for programming. We worked with the development group to put together a site plan that rearranged some of what may have been in the original site plan that they showed you. And again, this is what we showed you back in November as well. So there haven't been any changes to this from November. But tying in a drop-off, making sure that there's a drop-off close to the building. There is a lot of parking near the building. There is ADA accessible parking near the building. And then the ability for, again, some of that multi-purpose space to flow out into the larger event space. And for drive up with a garage door so that you can bring in tables and chairs or any other things you may need for that event space if you need to do any rentals for those needs. We looked at material precedents on the site. So these are a couple of elevations from Cobblestone's plan, their development plan. The top image is one of their apartment buildings, and then the bottom image is the building that's actually hard to see, but it's right across that drive from this one. So it's the one with the outdoor seating and the rooftop and the restaurant. And so what we wanted to do here was to make sure the buildings kind of spoke the same language, that there were similar aesthetic to both, but that this building, being a draw and being an event center, also stood out a little bit in a way so that the community knew that it wasn't just one of the other retail buildings on site. So the material palette that's used here at Cobblestone, they've got some kind of more residential type siding materials, but then down at the bottom, there's a couple of different materials. There's that cobblestone, stone, and then the limestone looking material down at the bottom right next to it. And then there's also this brick that's used on the restaurant building, retail building. And so those were some of the materials that we tried to drive into the design of this. And again, some of that will still be part of the next steps and part of the discussion, is to kind of further refine what those materials are. And so with that, with the conceptual design, again, we tried to pull in some of that limestone down at the base of the building, some of the brick that's on site, give that entrance something that really feels really open and really inviting to the community, because this is a building that wants to be occupied most of the day to really activate the development and activate the town. And so looking at the kind of corner elevation, this front elevation, bringing a lot of light into the building and a lot of natural daylight into a lot of the spaces as well.
I just want to add something. The building looks very bland. So we've spent a lot of time and energy on our marketing, our design, and I don't see that incorporated in here anywhere. It's just kind of a bland color, unless I'm seeing it wrong in what's in front of me. I just feel like, where's Rolesville's kind of flavor incorporated in this building? I don't see that, unless I'm missing something.
Well, and so part of that is that's the next step in the design process too, is to really go through this feasibility to understand the floor plan, understand the program, understand the general conceptual, come to you with what those costs look like, what that budget looks like, make sure that you're comfortable with kind of the direction moving forward, and then to really start to refine some of those more details. And so I know one of the comments last time was about cobblestone. Maybe we bring some of those cobblestone materials in, and that's where we want to hear some of that feedback too. So that feedback is really good, and that's kind of the next step of where we go from here as well.
Thank you.
So in terms of the project budget, so again, the key inclusions to what we're showing in this option A building, this building we just showed you, is that it's about 16,500 square feet. It's a 2-story building, has that large event space, that full-size basketball court, the 2 multi-purpose room classrooms, kitchen, staff offices, support spaces, and the elevator and the stairs, obviously, to go between those 2 floors. Looking at it from a construction cost perspective, again, these were the numbers we looked at last time. We were looking at a range between $350 to $415 a square foot, which is that 5.8 to 6.9 million on the construction cost. And we talked briefly about the project budget and how that translates up to a project budget cost. So what the project budget is, it includes the construction cost budget, so whatever those construction costs are. It'll include furniture, data telecom, equipment that's not fixed in place. So anything fixed in place is typically part of that construction cost, but it would include the rest of that equipment, any AV equipment, design fees, meter costs, signage, special inspections. And that range is about from that 7 to 8 million. And what that does is that project budget kind of looks at your total all-in costs on this. So that would be kind of that comprehensive list of costs that you would have.
What does special inspections means?
So that is like construction materials testing. That is testing for soils on site. That's testing for when they do steel, checking welds. It's something that's typically required by building code.
Cool.
And so diving into those costs a little bit more. So I mentioned that there's this range. We talked about this range on the construction cost side, which will translate to a range on that project budget side that we just showed. And some of that range has to do with really this kind of next level of design. So understanding where your comfort level is with that cost, and also being able to look at kind of where we are now, which is maybe on the higher end, and then coming down to that lower end or that mid-range is changing some of those high-end finishes to mid-range finishes, or specifying mid-range finishes, reducing some sunscreens. Those numbers did include a generator. They included a lot of that food service equipment, included gym equipment and bleacher allowances and things like that. So as some of those numbers get defined and are understood whether they're part of this project budget or not part of this project budget, that's where we are able to help define some of those construction costs as well.
Just to build the building, let me just make sure I'm clear on the numbers. Just to build the building, construction cost is the 5 point, I'm rounding up, 8 to 6.8, just for the building, right?
Correct.
And then all the additional things that you mentioned would go up to about 8 million?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I did a lot of talking so far. Any questions? I can
What-
pause here too. so.
The one question about the generator being included, is there anything grant-wise we could work with for like it being like a disaster shelter? Like, is there something we can work with that, since you would include the generator and stuff like that?
Yeah, there definitely are grants available
Okay.
for generators.
All right.
And we've seen those throughout other facilities similar
Okay.
to this.
All right.
That is the thing about a facility like this, is it does already tick a lot of the boxes on the kind of shelter discussion. It has the large spaces, it has smaller spaces where you could divide people. It has the kitchen. Typically, they'd like to see maybe one shower, but putting one shower in a facility like this wouldn't be too difficult.
Do we have any requirements structural-wise, since I know it's gonna be a little lighter at the top end?
It depends on what level of shelter you're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
kind of depends on that. yeah.
Okay.
I apologize, I may have missed it. What's the driver to need a generator?
There isn't one. You don't need a generator here.
It was just something that thought would be a good
We just included it to make sure that it included that kind of full scope, and then, again, we can dial some of that back. We just
Yeah.
kind of showing
'Cause
everything.
how much cost is, you figured in there? Because I guess this is figured in the whole overall cost already, is that right?
Yes. I have to look back. It was somewhere between 50 and 100,000 that was in there for the generator.
Yeah,
And it depends
Which-
on how much of the transfer switch too.
which is nice, but if it's something that we wouldn't use a lot, and also they make portables, like you see at the fairgrounds and stuff, you would just design the building where you can easily hook it up and turn the lights back on if you need to, but let's just define that a little bit better on, that may be something that we could do it another way. In other words, if you have a portable, you can use it somewhere else too.
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than at one spot.
And there's opportunities too, moving forward with alternates. And that is something that we've seen before, where maybe as a base option, you design it with a transfer switch for a temporary hookup, and as an alternate, you look to provide the full generator
Right.
too.
Also, I was thinking about when you said the generators, though, I'm thinking about storms, and because we have communities here where, I know we don't get a lot of storms, but could it be a designated storm shelter area and then a generation, even if portable, might be a good consideration to have for that purpose?
And it sounds like there are grants for the generator, and would there be grants for other things as well that are proposed to go into this facility if it were to be designated as a shelter?
I know that there are grants available in North Carolina for generators. I am not sure about other items.
And did we include this in the cost? I don't remember. We may have discussed it already. Charging stations?
All the site work is included, that's outside of this project, so that's in cobblestones.
Oh, it is in there. Okay, good.
So I don't know if they have it, but
Okay,
yeah.
good, good.
So one thing that we also wanted to bring to the table is, so we understand that some of these costs are maybe more than what you were initially looking to budget for this project. Looking at additional ways to reduce costs further would be the potential to go to a single-story building as opposed to a two-story building. This reduces the overall square footage of the building to about 12,000 from that 16,000. And again, that's because we're still looking at that, even in the two-story, we have that one larger space. And then here at the bottom are two potential options for programs if this were the single story, with the ability to convert it just for event spaces, just for meeting rooms likely, still keeping the recreation offices here, or the potential to keep that larger if it's a gym or large event space with a meeting room. And then in that option on the right, losing the ability to have those recreation offices here. So just a couple things to consider in terms of balancing the program that we had looked at originally with the square footage available if that went to a single story.
What's the cost difference? Do you have that breakdown?
Yes.
Because I think we talked about the different sizes, but I don't think we talked about one level versus two. If we did, I don't recall.
Yeah, so we're talking about, so from a project budget standpoint, that was between the 7 and 8 million. From a project budget standpoint, with that one story, we're looking at probably about a 5.7.
Question for JG, actually. Right now with our agreement with the middle school, is that the only facility we have for basketball? And would this be taking the place of that, or would this be an addition to?
With our projected growth, it would be an addition to.
Okay.
It would be our primary facility if it was a basketball But the Rolesville Middle School is the only gym in Rolesville that actually has a full-size court outside of the high school.
Okay.
Which, as we know, the high school has so many elements in the winter, it's hard for us to get in that space. So currently, the middle school is the only one we have available to us.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So if this is single story, is that still a full-size basketball court?
It really depends. It could be, still have a full-size basketball court. If it had a full-size basketball court, you probably wouldn't have any smaller meeting rooms or smaller classrooms in the facility, assuming recreation would still need to move offices in here. So there would probably be a balance of the offices to the other functions of those slightly smaller meeting and recreation, or meeting and fitness spaces.
So the one on the right, so that has a full basketball court in it?
The one with the tables, yes.
It's full basketball?
Yep.
But didn't you say the staff offices is completely removed from that?
Yeah, I mean, we can do a little bit of flip-flopping here. So, and the one on the left, we're showing the staff offices in that, that rectangle all the way to the left. And so we could do that with the gym. We would just lose that multipurpose room.
You just lose those, those rooms over there. And what was the numbers again? I know you, Commissioner Sutton asked, it was from 6 point something down to 5.7, or what was the, I guess I couldn't understand the difference in it. What's the difference, Sheila? Do you know?
7 to 8 versus 5.7 million,
So it's
or 2 to 3 million,
maybe 2 million or something.
2 to 3 million different.
Yeah, between 1.5 and 2.5 million, depending on which end of the full size you're looking at.
I mean, honestly, like I always say, we build for the future. So, I mean, I'm not trying to Band-Aid this thing together. If we're gonna do it, we do it right, and just make sure we get as much as we can into it. I mean, we were gonna have to look at costs, obviously, but, I mean, like I said, I don't want to build it too small.
That's the ideal,
yeah.
we just need the money.
Right.
I'm with you on that, build for the future, build for our growth rate.
Right.
Pretty fast.
Any other questions? Oh, I forgot, I've got one more piece. Clock tower. So we tossed this idea, this discussion around a little bit back in November. We can incorporate some type of clock tower within the building, within that corner of the building, but also knowing that this building is going to be shorter than a lot of the buildings around it, just because there's a lot of 3- and 4-story apartment buildings with pitched roofs. So it won't be, the front of the building really won't be quite as visible from Main Street as we would probably like to put a clock tower on the corner. So what we explored is the use of a standalone clock tower. And so there's a lot of opportunities within this development or in this, in kind of this corner of Rolesville for that standalone clock tower to sit. So a couple places identified are, let's see, with this new drop-off, we created this zone here that isn't 100% programmed, so that could be an opportunity for a centralized clock tower that really defines the cobblestone development and also ties back to some of the Rolesville branding. The Veterans Memorial is planned to be relocated to this place here, and again, there could be the opportunity to incorporate a clock tower with that memorial as well. And then there's a few other places on the site where that could be incorporated.
I really like the modern feel of it incorporated in the building. I like that modernness of it. But I'd like to see us put something somewhere. I like the idea of the Veterans Memorial, not necessarily a clock, but something to highlight that area, more so than it has been in the past. But I like the modernization of the clock tower incorporated in the building,
In the lobby, the way that, yeah,
how it's kind of,
yep.
I like that look.
I do like that, but I also work in the steel industry, so I like the standalone in the,
You trying to get some.
yeah, the standalone, I guess I'd call it the bean. It's right in front of the building. And I would match it with, if you look at anything on our logo, we have a clock tower right on our logo. Make it look just like that. That way you have a tie-in for the town's logo to actually be a part of that project.
This is the area you're talking
Yeah,
about
right
right here.
there. Yep.
Yeah, I think, that's a good spot, but I think the most visible spot that you'll see, without going into subdivision, I mean, not subdivision, but the center would be that corner.
Right.
Because the memorial is very visible now. I mean, you can see it coming up East Young Street and everywhere.
This corner?
Yeah.
Yeah, what
That's-
is on that corner? What's there?
I don't think they put anything on that corner, are they? It's the memorial now, the flagpole
Right.
and all that stuff.
I don't think anything's planned in there per se, right now.
He may be planning, it's a prime piece, I think, so.
So that'd be the northwest.
That one you could see, you can
Right.
see from the road.
From the
and-
corner, kind of what we envisioned in the beginning.
Yeah, because I think our advisor told us maybe on the other corner would be a good place to put it, which it would be. I think we own that property on the other corner, but if you want to keep it, with what we're developing, this would be it. This would be a good corner, I think.
Now, which other corner are you referring to?
The one where we used to have the old building, the corner we own,
Oh, on the other side.
Yeah.
I got you.
which that would be very visible there too. I think that's what this picture kind of shows, if you look at the top picture.
So it's kind of inviting from that corner.
But, it will work anywhere, Do you need I guess you need an answer or something, because,
There's a couple pictures down the line, if we work through it, show graphically what it looked like. Would you like a couple of those? And would you like to follow from Paul's idea of having it emulate what we have out front or bigger? Is that right? 'Cause I think that's what that clock tower is.
And then what's the
And
cost? The cost
You've
is
got
what
no
I'm
cost.
interested in. Like, what does this cost? Are we talking $1 million or are we talking $80,000? 80,000, we might have a conversation. $1 million, we might have a different conversation.
Our estimate was 250,000.
250,000.
Wait a second, when Buzz came in, what did he do for the clock?
Can't hear you, Michelle.
Didn't Buzz design the clock? So we're talking about a whole different design now?
No, the same
I
thing.
think Paul's
He's
suggested.
talking about
Yeah, just take
incorporating
picture
that
and
same,
Make it that way.
like the one that's out front,
you know?
Michelle.
Like with the logo now, just take that logo and just build that.
Okay, so the clock's already designed itself, though?
That's what he suggested.
No, that's not what I'm asking, though. I know it's designed on our logo, but I'm saying the clock itself was already designed and we chose one a couple of years ago. When Buzz came in,
Yes, for the logo.
no, not just the logo.
You're talking about the clock tower out front on the sign? There's kind of a replica, a small one.
Right,
out
right,
front.
right,
You're
right,
talking
right,
about that
yes.
same clock tower?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is
That's
that
what
where we're
Paul's
going?
saying.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you were just talking about the logo itself.
Yeah, Paul was saying we could incorporate that same, like a bigger version of
Right,
that.
okay, I'm sorry,
If
thank
we
you.
decide to go with a clock tower
Right.
standing alone.
Gotcha, all right, thanks.
I was trying to find a picture of it. I was struggling.
And so, yeah, the determination of where that goes exactly doesn't have to happen right now. We just wanted to have that discussion, open that up, and kind of confirm that the plan is still to look at a standalone clock tower. And it sounds like we're looking at maybe 3 or 4 locations here right now.
I sent it to you.
Oh, you did, okay. And I would say that I like what Mayor Curran said about putting it on the outside, because I feel like it would get a little lost in the inside of that development. So,
Yeah, I can see that.
all right.
I guess the biggest thing we have to find out is he have plans for that corner that we don't see on this drawing. So he do own the land now.
And if he does not, even incorporating some benches over there would be really nice as well.
Paul was saying do a
See,
replica
Main
of that
Street
one
may be
down there
doing something.
somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Not these kind of old fashioned looking.
Main Street is
More
doing some
modern,
improvements
like
there.
that one.
So it could be some benches
Some
and stuff.
benches, I think it would look really pretty. Really inviting.
So next steps. This would be the next step to the process. So we would move into schematic design. That's typically about an 8 to 12 week period. It kind of depends too on where we go in terms of the scale of the building, the size of the building. That includes design meetings, the final alignment of the design scope, the budget, final approval of design with the developer. So we've had conversations with them, but making sure that they're okay with everything as well. An opinion of probable cost at the end of that schematic design. So as we get further into this process, we refine those numbers closer and closer and closer. And procurement process selection. And so that's selection of determination of whether it will be design bid build or construction manager at risk or another method. The 2 stars that you see on here are typical spots where we would bring this back to you all for your review, your input, and there's other opportunities too as you want to be involved and kind of see where we are in the process too. Following schematic design, we would move into design development. That's a lot more design meetings where we get into a lot more of the details. We talk about some more of those MEP systems. We talk about the final finishes. We make selections on what those interior materials look like and go through another opinion of probable cost. In construction documents, we'll finalize those permit documents, construction documents, drawings, project manual, get it ready for the public bid process. In the bidding, drawings would be submitted to the authority having jurisdiction in order to obtain the permit. Public bid to either general contractors or subcontractors, depending on the procurement process. And then construction. And so we're assuming it's a possible 12-month construction. That's all kind of to be discussed too as with what happens with the market and what happens with subcontractor availability and material lead times over the next few months.
And Rachel, for the board's sake, I think we talked about during the schematic design period, we would make a determination of the best process we think for proceeding. I acknowledged today to the mayor that he was right when he brought it up a few months ago, that I think design build is the best process now, not a straight bid. I think we're going to need some assistance on bringing a team together with an architect and the contractor together and evaluate and negotiate a price for the project. And I think that works a lot better in a crowded setting like that, where we have one group, one team working for us. So we're going to make that full evaluation during the salmon or the schematic design period. But I do think I'm leaning towards heavily on the design build process. So based upon our conversation the other day.
Yep. Yeah, and with design build, the earlier involvement, well, with a construction manager at risk too, typically we would want to bring them in during that schematic design or at least at the very end of that schematic design process.
So you said something that caught my attention because you said we'll refine the design cost, I think I heard. Maybe I didn't hear it right. But so it's going to take you about, I'm guessing, I'm taking the 8 to 10 weeks and doing some quick math, about 44 weeks, right? Or about 10 months for the design. So you refine the cost, so you don't quote us a cost up front?
So,
explain that process to me.
Yep. So as we go through the design process, we make decisions on things like the generator or on things like what are we using which brick or which other material are we using on the outside? What type of roof material are we using? And we're putting together those opinions of probable cost, or the contractor is, depending on that procurement process. And those are basically doing checks for us. So those are checkpoints at which we can understand if we're still tracking towards budget, or if we need to take a step back and look at costs maybe have escalated in this material, so we're going to look at something else, and we're going to be balancing that way when we get to bidding. There's no surprise at what comes in and the numbers that come in at that point. So it's more of a checkpoint process for us as we go through and as we're refining.
And what, are you building in an estimate for an overage? 10%, 15%, what's that percentage?
Yeah, so we would carry a design contingency, and we would also probably, we also are at this point carrying escalation contingencies, market condition contingencies as well.
What percentage are you using?
I will have to double check.
Okay.
I believe we're carrying at least a 10% design contingency, and I think a 10% escalation as well right now.
Thank you.
So, I think coming out of tonight's meeting, we would like to know, how do we proceed through the schematic design phase? Are you prepared to go ahead and spend further time and effort on the two-story design? Based upon what you saw tonight, do you want us to reconsider a different design? Or where are you on the project at this point?
Where does this fall on the priorities list that we talked about? And forgive me because I don't remember. Kind of that top, we have a huge wish list, but at the top we have like priority A. Is this in the priority A list?
Yes.
I just don't remember.
Yeah, but I guess this is over the budget amount that's in our CPI, right?
Say that again.
The estimate we're receiving is above the CPI estimate that's in the plan, is that right? We don't have 8 million in there, do you recall?
I think we used a lower number for that planning document.
I was
Yes.
thinking 5.
5 billion sounds
Yeah.
familiar.
So I think the key question is, if we already got 5 budgeted, you know, where do we make the gap up at?
That's a big gap on the high end.
Yeah, it's a good gap on the high end.
Without counting contingency and rising construction.
Finance director
Right.
in the room.
So, you know, that's the thing, and that may need a little analysis, because I think we need to, I think everybody's comfort level will be better if we feel like we can afford it. And, you know, being it's above budget, and we know the times of the day, if we'd done it 3 years ago, we probably could have done it for that. We just need to see where the extra financing would come from, if we can justify it. And, you know,
Did Mitch talk about this at the retreat? Did we figure that in his numbers when he did the calculation? I don't remember seeing it.
We did, it's
Yeah.
listed.
It was
The
listed
building?
in that, when he
Yeah.
did that.
but the 5 million was,
Gotcha.
the 5 million was.
And now Amy was watching the meeting, would you like to hear?
Oh, there's Amy. I was like, is Amy here?
She might have some ideas about this, or further, if you, are you interested in
Let's
hearing?
hear
Amy.
ideas, because I think everybody thinks it's the right thing to do moving forward, but we just want to make sure we're
Good evening.
comfortable doing it.
So I may have missed some of it coming down the hallway. I apologize. So right now, what's budgeted, as in currently budgeted this fiscal year, is just your design cost, okay? So we put in a $400,000 for design. So what we're in the process, though, is the budget for this next year, which is what we were talking about at the retreat. And what we have plugged in right now is, I believe, 6.6 million for the actual construction. So the total cost we were anticipating was 7 million. So what we've got planned out right now is 6.6. Now, we are still in the budget phase, obviously, for the next few months. You've not adopted a budget yet for next year. So there's still time to talk through how that's going to work out and what types of funding sources you want to tap for that.
So, it's not an impossible hurdle, in your opinion, then?
I think it's all a matter of what you, as a board, prioritize and how you choose to spend the funds that are available for you.
You know, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but just one thing that I think I remember from the retreat, budget retreat, we talked about budget. Our CPI, CPI is basically projecting a 5% growth factor in there. Is that right? Yeah, 5%.
5% growth
The model.
in,
In revenue.
well, as far as property tax. So, yes, it projects 5% growth in property tax each year for the first 5 years, and then it projects 3% growth in
Right.
property tax.
Right. So a big economic development project, you know, like we talking about, is not particularly plugged in as a big, you know, increase. It's more, we just consider it as natural 5%. Right?
Natural growth is what we're saying. I mean, the model is deliberately a
Yeah,
very conservative model.
And I think you did a good job, and I don't fault you one bit. I mean, I commend on the way you guys do that, and, because we all want to sleep good at night and feel good about that. But I was reading an article several months ago where it talked about economic development, how it connects to CPI. CIP. How the two connects. In other words, you use the revenue generated from the project to pay for some of the cost of what you're improving on. And a lot of times they use it for roads and stuff. A lot of times they use it to improve the thing, but you connect that. And I'm just wondering, if something you can look at and maybe, you know, we can analyze. You know, we haven't thought about what this development is going to bring, because we're not going to do the community center unless we do development. I mean, we're not going to just build it out there by itself. We would, you know, it's part of the development. So if the development come, and it's big, I mean, you know, you got cobblestone, you got the apartments that are going with it, and you got the townhouses going with. How much revenue do we project that? How much revenue is the economic development part going to bring us? Which I think is a pretty good sum. And it's just something to consider. It's something for you to consider as a financial person. Is that, does that make it more a bite-sized piece, you know? Because other than that, we don't really have anything from a capital improvement to use the revenue generated from cobblestone, I don't think. It's just more or less figured in the 5% that kind of distributes to everything.
Right, right. It is a conservative model that does not take into effect potential large-scale commercial
Right.
development that may come along. That's why we've talked about, as we go through this CIP, why it's really important for us to revisit that model every year.
Every
Because
year.
the conditions change.
Exactly.
Growth hopefully exceeds those projections, and allows you to maybe move some things up on your list that you have out in future years.
I do have a quick question. Oh, I'm sorry, Ryan.
No, go ahead.
What is the time frame for us to start this? I mean, isn't there a time frame on that, a couple of years? So how does that play into trying to figure it out and when that deadline is for the town and for Cobblestone?
Cost is
If
always
you can't get there tonight,
Right.
then my suggestion would be that you direct Amy and I to rerun the model with a new number. That'll be pretty quick and easy. And we can kind of review that in 2 weeks, talk through that again. And then if you're not ready then, Michelle, it's really, I mean, sometime soon, we need to kind of make a decision
Yeah.
on how we're proceeding.
I know, but we have a deadline, right? Isn't there a deadline that was
So
established?
we have a deadline that is from, if we had gone the lease route, we were going to have it built by February of 2024. If we're building it on our own, it is silent on the deadline. We've always taken it as such that we want to meet that deadline of a February 2024 period. But since we are probably proceeding on our own, which we are, we don't have a per se
Okay.
deadline. I've always assumed that we want to try and meet the date that we've always talked about, which is February 2024.
And that's assuming, like Ronnie said, development has taken place around or started.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. So as a board, what do y'all feel about that direction?
Yeah, I would direct staff to get some more information.
Y'all feel good about that?
Do you want us in 2 weeks, have a little model rerun through and have Amy kind of, I think Amy can probably do it, kind of explain if we did a 6.6, an 8 million maybe version and see what it comes out in the context of the model? Because you're familiar with the model now, I think. Would that be fair for you to do that?
Can we have those itemized costs, though? I'd like to see like the projected design costs, some of those things we talked about, the generator, with the generator, without the generator. It's hard to kind of guess when you have this big bulk number that you're looking at, instead of looking at and breaking down what does that include. Because is there like a base that we can look at and then you can say, or here's the smorgasbord that you can choose from? Maybe we saw that a long time ago, but I haven't seen it with updated
No,
numbers.
and I'm going to ask Rachel, is now the time for that, or do you have that?
So the base is that construction costs, that 5.8. And then the smorgasbord is
Up
your
to the
top
8.
number. So that's kind of the range, the base to the everything piece. In terms of looking at it from the building design perspective, it probably doesn't make sense to look at that level of detail at this time because there are so many questions still. And it's going to be more about, you're not going to want to look at it line by line in terms of, oh, let's take out this piece of glass and that's going to reduce here.
Oh, God, no, I'm not talking about that level of detail, no way. But I'm talking about the big buckets, the big buckets.
I do have that all broken out, and so, yeah, I can provide you an update with that.
Yeah, the big buckets, not those little bitty buckets.
So I have a question for you.
I think maybe just expand on that a little bit. When you build the budget, do you put it together with pieces? You know, do you actually put it together with pieces that adds up, or that's based on just a square footage number? And it's not a base built budget from a basis and you build it up.
It is, the construction one is itemized, but it's only itemized for one number in that range. So we don't have an itemized for the low end, the mid-range, and the high end.
Gotcha.
But I do have that project budget, all of those items in the project budget broken out, and we can definitely
Yeah,
get
I think
you that.
that's kind of what, in other words, how did you put it together?
Quick question. 350 to 415 square foot. How did you come up with the 350 and 415?
So the smorgasbord is the 415, and the 350 dials back, looking at some of these items here, brings you down towards that 350.
That's pretty high, I thought, for construction today.
It is, and
It's
construction
higher.
today is
I was
a little
going to
bit
say,
crazy
it's
right
higher
now.
than it was when we looked at it a couple years ago.
But I didn't feel like it was 315, not 350,
Yeah,
not based on something that I
yeah,
just
this
looked at in class.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing, 20% increase in costs over the last year, and
I know it's gone up, but I'm just
saying.
saying that there was something that I had to take with the Department of Real Estate, one of my classes, and it wasn't at 350 or 415, but I know you have a lot of things incorporated into that, but it still wasn't at 350. But yeah, I know y'all know what you're doing, so don't get me wrong.
Yeah, still prices are almost double.
I was going to
so-
say,
Yeah.
commercial and the price
No,
is
it was commercial, it
it's
was not
through the
resident,
roof.
it was not residential.
You
But
gotta-
that's okay, you're the expert on that, I was just asking.
You got to figure in the COVID greed, too. Come on. I mean, it is
When-
what it is.
Wendell just approved their town hall to be, started now, they've got through the process, and it ended up being right at $400 a square foot. And it's about the same size building, about 18, maybe a little bit bigger, 18,000 square feet. And, you know, Town Hall may have a little different features and all, so it's not
I
a
know
great
there's a lot of things,
comparison, but
there's a lot incorporated into it, but I just didn't think it was starting at 350. Well, that's okay, I just asked.
Grants.
yeah, I think so.
But again, it wasn't residential, it was commercial.
All right.
So,
Continue.
so you're good with bringing 2 weeks, remodel up with the new model numbers, itemized information, and continued dialoguing with
Big
yourself?
big buckets though.
Right. Okay.
Well, you know, quite frankly, the gap ain't as big as we thought it was. We thought it was
Right.
5 million to this, so,
Right.
you know, it doesn't sound like it's 6.
1.5 to 2.5 million.
Yeah, so, you know.
Okay.
I think it's a good
We'll
plan.
schedule for 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank
You
you.
do a
Thank
great
you.
job. I really
Let me
appreciate
make sure I
you.
got through the rest of this. Yes, good.
I really appreciate you coming out. You spent a lot of time on this. You've done a great job for us, and you know, the board is very engaged, and you know, we just want to get it right. I mean, this is something we want to get right. And appreciate your patience with us. I really do.
Thank you.
Well, we love working with communities, growing communities and stuff. It's just a lot of fun to be a part of that growth process.
Probably take a special person to do your job. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you all help with design at the Clayton Community Center by chance?
We did not.
Oh,
no.
okay, I was just curious, because
Yeah.
it looked kind of similar. Thank
it
you.
does, don't it?
It does look kind of similar.
I haven't seen that one yet, so I'll have to look at it.
Yeah, it's nice. Very modern.
I'm gonna send you all this. I'm gonna send you a list of what they showed us in class. But I believe her, don't get me wrong, I just want to know where it started.
I remember last time it was a little bit lower, but it was still up to like 3-something. Did you get my picture that I sent?
Yeah, I did, thank you.
The last time we looked, but each time it goes up. The longer we wait, the higher it gets.
So what are we waiting on?
Mayor, Board of Commissioners, thank you. Our next item is an update on it's 2 plans we're updating you on. One is the bicycle plan, and the other is the open space and Greenway plan. Mick Adams is updating both those plans. This is a check-in, just to make sure we're going down the right path. Everything's looking good right before we get to the finish line. So, again, it's just a check-in to make sure we're headed in the same direction. As you already know, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board is here also to hear this presentation tonight. In front of you and the Parks and Rec Advisory Board have 4 maps in front of you also. We try to blow them up a little bit and make it a little bit easier on you. If you are following along and have the packet, you can maybe be able to zoom in a little bit better on your laptops or your iPads as well as we get through the presentation. But we do have Catherine with McAdams here tonight to present where we are to date and what final steps we need to take to get to the finish line to bring the final product, the final draft to you for adoption. Again, I just want to really make sure the focus on these are 2 plans that run in parallel. One, the bicycle plan is with a grant with NCDOT, and that's an update of a 2013 plan. And the Greenway and open space plan that we're currently updating is for our current 2001 plan. So that's what we're updating at this time. And I'd like to turn it over to Catherine, and then she'll lead you through this presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to present to y'all tonight on the bicycle plan and the Greenway plan.
You're okay presenting to pick up last.
Oh, okay. Is it okay if would that be fine? Okay, cool. So just to go over a couple things before we get started, kind of the outline of tonight's presentation. So we're going to go over the purpose of each plan and the vision and goals, the draft vision and goals that we've created, the community engagement review of what we've done so far with our community, and then draft policy recommendations and draft network recommendations for the bike plans and the Greenway plan, and then also priority projects, and then next steps. So, as JG mentioned, we are developing the bicycle plan and the Greenway plan concurrently. And so because of that, we've kept both plans on the same project schedule. And we've also combined community engagement efforts so that, you know, community members are able to comment and provide feedback and participate in both plans at the same time, just so it's easier for the community and staff to participate. So just going over the project schedule. So we started last year in late spring on project visioning. We had our first kickoff meeting, our first meeting with the steering committee members, and we've developed like the vision, the goals for the plan. And then in the summer and fall, we've done existing conditions where we've gathered data, we did site visits, field work, reviewed previous plans and policies, also launched a community survey that was open throughout the summer. And then we also had jurisdictional meetings with neighboring communities, you know, Wake County, Wake Forest, City of Raleigh, Franklin County, to make sure that both the proposed Greenway networks and bicycle networks are aligned with all of our neighboring jurisdictions, so that we're also considering regional connections as well for both the bike plan and the Greenway plan. Now we're at the tail end of plan recommendations phase, so where we've developed our network, we've also just developed priority corridors, we've developed our draft policy and program recommendations, we've had our steering committee meeting where we've presented this to our steering committee members, to the Open Space and Greenway Committee, and then we've also had a public meeting as well where we've presented these recommendations to the public. And then the last stage is the implementation and final plan, and we're gonna get started that in the next couple of weeks, where we're combining everything into the draft plan. We're developing an action and implementation strategy for the proposed projects and the priority corridors. And then so we'll have our final steering committee meeting, our final public meeting, and then of course I'll be back presenting to y'all in the late spring on, you know, recommending for adopting these plans. So before I kind of go into all of the draft recommendations, I just wanted to provide some context for y'all and explain the purposes for both the bike plan and the Greenway plans. So for the bicycle plan, the purpose, we're really answering these four main questions. And that's, you know, where do people want to go by bike? So we're identifying the key locations that people want to bike to and from. How do we connect to those places? So we're looking at where are the corridors that people want to bike along? What are the facility types? What are the standards that we're going to be using to connect to those locations? And then how do we build out the network? So that's when we're really looking at policy and program recommendations, we're identifying priority projects, and then we're looking at cost and funding opportunities. And then for the bike plan specifically, since Rolesville Moves was just adopted in May of 2021, that plan has really been our defining document that has really helped to guide this bicycle plan. So we're really making sure that we take that complete streets approach that's really laid out in the Rolesville Moves CTP. And then how do we build a bike-friendly community? So this last question is all about programming and how do we identify programs that really promote biking and community in Rolesville. So for the draft vision, we created this vision with the steering committee members. We did a visioning exercise, and then also we gathered input from the public through the community survey to develop this vision. So I'll quickly read that out. So it says, Rolesville will be a town that is safe and accessible for community members of all ages and abilities to ride a bike through the transportation system that connects neighborhoods, parks, schools, commercial centers, and neighboring communities via active modes. We also, similarly, through that visioning exercise and through input from the public, we developed draft goals for the plan, and they really focus on 5 key areas: accessibility and connectivity, so making sure we're making those connections through town; regional connectivity, so we're connecting into the Triangles Greenway network, we're connecting into Raleigh, Wake Forest; and then really focusing in on improving safety, improving equity, and then project feasibility. Now, switching over to the Greenway Plan for these three elements, the plan purpose for the Greenway Plan, again, pretty similar. We're answering these four key questions. You know, where do people want to go via Greenway? How do we connect to those places? And then how do we build the network? And then how do people plan to use the Greenway? And for the draft Greenway vision, again, we did a similar exercise as well for the Greenway Plan. And so the vision reads out, it states, the town of Rolesville will have an accessible greenway system that connects people, parks, and destinations in the community while maintaining its small town character and protecting the natural and cultural resources that residents value most. The goals, we got a lot of very similar input from the bike plan and the green plan on what are the goals for both of these. And so there is some overlap there. And so the key focuses for the Greenway Plan are also accessibility, regional connectivity, safety, equity, and environmental protection. So just to give an overview of the community engagement, the first phase, we had a community survey that was launched and kept open throughout the summer, and we got really great representation from the community, and we had 300 participants. And so some of the key takeaways from the survey are that community members really wanted improved walking and biking connections to neighborhoods. That was really important, to schools, to the commercial areas along Main Street and Rogers Road, to parks, and then also to neighboring communities in Greenway. So, you know, people really want that connection to the Neuse River Trail. They want to connect and ride their bike to Wake Forest. And then also, people really stress the need for improved on-street bike facilities through town, and then also improving intersections and Greenway street crossings. And then people also said that, you know, we really want multimodal connections, again, to the neighboring communities and the other greenways in the triangle. And I pulled a couple of quotes from the survey comments, just to, and these quotes really kind of represented a wide range of folks, and they kind of all said a similar thing, where people currently feel like they can only bike in their neighborhood, and maybe they'll want to cross from them because they feel unsafe to bike on the roadway. And also, you know, making sure that there's safe connections to schools. That'll be like a really game changer for a lot of families. And then lastly, I really liked this quote. Someone said, "We would love to see Rolesville become more connected to the Triangle Greenway system. Not only so we could bike to destinations, but so other folks could bike here and experience our wonderful little town." So before I go into the draft policy and network recommendations, I just wanted to go over the recommended facility types that we have in the plan, just so that everyone has an understanding of exactly, you know, what these facility types are. So getting started with our Greenway recommendations, and then one thing to note, JG mentioned that the bike plan is funded by NCDOT, and so because the bike plan is grant funded, it needs to incorporate not only on-street bicycle facilities, but off-street facilities as well. And so all the Greenway network recommendations that are in the bicycle plan, in the Greenway plan, excuse me, will be folded into the bicycle plan as well. So just like, so you know, like the recommended facility types for greenways and side paths will also be incorporated into the bike plan. But so for a greenway, you know, a greenway, I think pretty much everyone knows what a greenway is, but, you know, it's a shared use path that's off-road and it's separated from motor vehicle traffic. And, you know, usually it's along stream corridors and utility corridors and parks. For a side path, this is also another off-road accommodation. And similar to a greenway, it's multi-use, but it is adjacent to a roadway facility. So you can see here, this photo shows a side path in Cary. And then moving on to our specific bicycle plan recommendations, we have a separated bicycle lane. So This facility is essentially a bicycle lane that provides an added buffer between the bike lane and the motor vehicle travel lane. And then it also provides some vertical separation as well to create a more comfortable and safe biking experience for bicyclists. And this is a photo of a recently constructed bicycle lane in downtown Raleigh. And they use flexible delineator posts. This is what a lot of communities use. It's really cost effective. You can remove the flexible delineators for maintenance, and it's also cost effective too. Buffered bike lanes or a bike lane. So a bike lane, of course, is a shared street accommodation where the bike lane is just right adjacent to the motor vehicle lane and it's within the roadway. Common practice now is, a bike lane and a buffered bike lane could really be used interchangeably. Where you do have that extra space, it is recommended to provide that 1.5 foot to 4 foot buffer, just to give a little bit more breathing room for bicyclists, being more separate from the motor vehicle lane. But where we do have areas where there are constraints, of course, you can use the standard bicycle lane where there's no buffer there. And then the last facility type is a bicycle boulevard or like a shared lane marking. This is not necessarily like a facility because it's more of a shared street accommodation. It uses a combination of shared lane markings, which are these markings here. It's the bicycle image with the 2 arrows above and signage along the road. So bicycle boulevards are used in a lot of communities as a way to kind of create bicycle-friendly streets that make connections to greenways or side paths or other, off-street facilities.
Is that actually in the triangle?
Yes.
Where is that?
So, this photo, sorry, we do have shared lane markings and bike boulevards in the triangle, but this is actually out in Oregon.
Okay. I'm trying to think of one in the triangle.
So there are a lot, okay, do you know, I think the name is like St. John Street in Raleigh, and it's off the Walnut Creek Greenway.
Oh.
And so basically there's a gap in the Walnut Creek Greenway. And so what they've done is it's just a quiet residential street. And so they've put shared lane markings and signage to make up that gap. It's safe. Kids can bike on that neighborhood street, and it just makes up that gap where you really have constraints and you can't put a greenway, there.
Gotcha. I just hadn't seen it before. That's interesting.
Yeah, I should go out. I live in Raleigh. I should go out and take a picture there so that y'all can see that.
Yeah, I haven't seen that before either around here. But, so if cars get behind them, they don't have to move over anything, let the cars pass? They got, according to this, they may use the full lane and.
Yeah, so, and I'll show you this. This is a little informational card that a town used to explain bike boulevards. Because this is a corridor where they're making the connection to a greenway. And so, yeah, you use the pavement markings, you use wayfinding signage. If there's any issue with high-speed traffic on a residential road, you can add optional traffic calming measures like speed bumps. So that is an option, and that's just encouraging slower speeds. Usually for bicycle boulevards, it really is safest. And, roadway speed limits in residential neighborhoods are between 15 and 25 miles per hour. So the bicyclist is not traveling that much faster than the car. And so it usually is safer to stay in that center lane. But honestly, it does depend on the comfort of the cyclist to either move off to the side or if they would prefer to stay in the center. I like to move off to the side, but you want to put the shared lane markings in either the center of the road, depending on how wide the road is, the travel lane, or in the right tire track to make sure the cyclist is a little bit off to the side there, and so that the car can safely pass them.
I was thinking state law gave bikes the right
Yeah,
anyway
3 feet
to
of
the
space.
streets.
Oh, yes, yes.
So I'm not exactly sure what this changes in the state law, because
Oh, no, it wouldn't change anything in the state law, so bicyclists are allowed to take a full lane, and they are allowed to ride in the road, and then also, North Carolina law requires motorists to provide at least 3 feet of space when they're passing a bicyclist in the roadway.
So this pretty much just gives notice.
Yeah, exactly. It's really kind of a wayfinding measure to allow bicyclists to get to their preferred, Greenway or other facility. And then also it provides kind of like an alert to a motorist to say, hey, just be, watching out. There are bicyclists who frequently may bike, on this roadway. So yeah, it is more of like giving a notice, an alert, or like wayfinding. That's why I said it's not really a facility, it's more just like an accommodation. But it's still really helpful, and it really does help with safety to be able to kind of have, it's a low-cost measure to be able to provide those connections to other facilities. And then this is just an image showing all of the facilities that I just went over. And from most protected, meaning that, they're safest, they're not, mixed with motor vehicle traffic, to least protective. So of course you have your Greenway and side path as the safest option, and then moving down from separated bike lane, to bike lane, and then of course, bike boulevards or shared lane markings. So now I'm gonna get into some of our draft policy recommendations. So first I'll go through the bike plan policy recommendations, and then I'll go through the Greenway recommendations. So first off, I'll just have to say too is, with the new LDO update, there are extensive recommendations that just already make Rolesville, or will make Rolesville, a very bicycle-friendly community, with the recommendations that have just been adopted in June of last year. So usually with a lot of other plans, we do have a lot more recommendations for LDOs, but for this one, we don't have as many policy recommendations because there's already been such a significant improvement with the new LDO. And Rolesville already has a complete streets policy, and it's, section 6.7 of the LDO, and so that's really great. A lot of communities are missing that. So these are just a couple of things that would really bring Rolesville to kind of the next level with policy recommendations. So one, and this is standard practice, so amending the Rolesville moves CTP to include bike plan recommendations. So anytime there's any new planning recommendations, we do recommend updating the CTP to incorporate those new recommendations. And then also establishing bicycle wayfinding signage, establishing dedicated funding in the CIP for bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and then establishing bicycle facility maintenance policies. So we already do have some Greenway maintenance policies, and so once bicycle facilities are developed in town, it would be really great to have established maintenance policies for these facilities as well. Also, providing staff training and resources related to bike infrastructure. This really helps so that as the plan gets developed and projects are underway, having someone on staff with that knowledge is really helpful. And then also, either establishing a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee to help oversee the development of these projects, or either we talked about expanding OSAG to also look at and help guide the development of the recommendations in the bike plan. Now for the specific LDO recommendations, we have expand the complete streets policy to require implementation of planned bike and pedestrian facilities along proposed thoroughfares and collectors upon development. So the current complete streets policy is really great, but I did notice that the specific language of the policy speaks to existing thoroughfares and, existing roadways. So as Rolesville is developing, and if there are expansions to the street networks, I think it is really important to expand and tweak that policy just a little bit to make sure that we are looking at all proposed roadways within town. Also, another recommendation is to reduce the town speed limit from 35 to 25. This is also a standard practice, common in the Vision Zero program as well, to reduce crash rates for bicyclists and pedestrians and improve safety for bicyclists and pedestrians as they're traveling on the roadway. And then also my last recommendation for the LDOs is to expand design standards for streets and sidewalks to include bicycle facility design standards. So we already have great design standards for streets and sidewalks and greenways, but as we're building out the bike network, I think it's also important to include typical sections, intersection treatments, minimum widths for bicycle facilities, and connectivity requirements that are included for sidewalks, streets, and greenways. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the policies before I move to the Greenway policy recommendations?
I just have a point of clarification on the reduced town speed from 35 to 25. Are you specifically referring to where there's bike lanes included, or are you talking about just in general throughout the whole town?
Yeah, in general, and this is not obviously every street. You know how so the town speed limit is, wherever the speed is not marked, assume it's 35. So like that's what I'm talking about. So it wouldn't be a recommendation to change every street to 25 miles per hour. That's, unrealistic. But where it allows reducing that speed limit to from 35 to 25 is really life-changing in terms of a safety perspective.
And you're saying just in general, not where there's bike lanes. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear.
So, it is important to reduce speeds where there are bicycle facilities, but also with Rolesville, a lot of those roadways are maintained by DOT.
Right.
And DOT will not reduce speed limits. Well, it just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking about. Yeah, some of the ones we don't control.
Where Rolesville has the authority to do so, it is our recommendation to do so. But where you cannot, obviously that is the point of having these facilities on the roadway so that we can move bicyclists and pedestrians, away from the travel lanes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Specifically, we have bike lanes that were added to Granite Falls Boulevard. We currently have parking in those. So what's the recommendation for that road specifically?
Yeah, so we have proposed, and I guess I'll just get to it now. We proposed separated bicycle lanes, so putting the delineators there,
Okay.
and that would prohibit parking along Granite Falls.
Okay.
And, because, I'm so glad we did the survey in the summer, because we got so many comments about the issue with the parking in the bike lanes on Granite Falls, because of the swim club.
Really?
Yeah.
That people were against it?
Oh, well, people were against the parking in the bike lanes.
For those who bike to the gym, obviously.
Yeah.
So then that poses a problem, because then what happens to those that, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, just
Can't hear you in
asking.
the mic.
I'm just asking, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but what happens to the parking that currently takes place in those parking spaces? In those bike lanes?
Well.
No, it's beyond using the parking lot. No, it's not. I'm just asking, that's just my question. I know the obvious answer, but I am just asking that, because I think there was some other deal that was made for those bike lanes, but I don't know the legality or the logistics of that, so I am just asking. But I don't think that's really something you can answer.
Yeah, well, another approach too to think about this is if you provide safe accommodations and, just biking and walking around Rolesville and becoming familiar with the community as I've done the plan, Rolesville has the potential to be so walkable and bikeable friendly. And because of the neighborhoods being so kind of close-knit, and you have the opportunity to create those greenway and bicycle facilities to reach these destinations in the town core. And so once you provide those facilities, we won't have as many people having to drive to the swim club. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, you'll have more people being able to safely bike with their kids to, to the swim club and to the other rec centers. That's what, we got a lot of comments from people in the survey saying they want to be able to do that. Like, having to kind of pack up everything in their car it would be so much better if they would be able to, like, safely be able to bike to these areas without having to get in a car to do so. So I think it obviously won't solve all the problems with parking. It's a tricky situation, making that balance there, but it will reduce some of that burden of having to, needing more parking, but by providing alternative methods of getting there, you're reducing that need.
Okay, so I have a quick question. Does anybody know what came first, the bike lane or parking?
I've been a member of that club. It's my development neighborhood.
Okay.
So before the bike lane came, during the summer, we would pull up on the grass, and after we were done, we would back out onto the street.
Correct, I did.
And so then the parking came, which on one side of the street is bigger than the other side of the street. So that's a question makes me think this is a bigger conversation than just this. But then that's a concern that I have about, are people going to go back to parking on the opposite side of the street and backing out into traffic, which is a great concern for any bikers, greater concern for any bikers.
So that's why I'm curious, what came first, the bikes or the cars? And again, when I say you
Oh,
probably
no,
could
the
not
cars
answer
didn't
it.
come on the street until the bike lane came.
Yeah, because
So the bike lane was there first?
there was a center turn lane and it turned into bicycle lanes, so there was never parking on that road.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
There
know.
was a center lane that
For the
was
center lane,
removed.
right.
Right.
Oh,
So the center lane was removed?
Yeah, but the biggest issue I have with that road right now is if you're riding a bike, you come up on a parked car, a door opens from that parked car, you no longer have that 3 feet of space between you and those moving cars. So that's the only issue I have with that.
So that was why I asked the question, what happens to the parking? Because I didn't know
Yeah,
which came first, the parking or the bicycle lane, the bicycle.
I mean, right now, technically, people are not supposed to park there because you're not supposed to park in a bicycle lane, so a space
Okay, so the
that's-
bike lane came first.
So like, I guess the legal definition of a bike lane, is its exclusive use of bicyclists. And so, like, for example, in Raleigh, there's a lot of bike lanes downtown, but there's also a lot of churches. So they've actually had to create a statute that allows parking in that bike lane on Sundays from the time of the church service. And that's the only time that parking is allowed there, because you're legally not supposed to park, you can get a citation, you're not supposed to park in a bicycle lane.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
So you make that an exception for certain times of day?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and that's what you would usually have to do. I mean, it's not really ideal, but, in those kind of constrained corridors, that's kind of the best you can do.
That's hard to do for a gym, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's either bikes or cars.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, people will want to, like, bike to the gym.
You need a bike parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right.
a bike parking.
And it is true, I mean, the goal is to get people out walking and biking, and so again, it didn't matter one way or the other, I just wanted to know if anybody knew, so thank you all.
So moving on to the draft Greenway policy recommendations. So again, the LDO with the update, there's extensive policies that, do require developers to build greenways. Greenways are defined, there are design standards, and so our recommendations are pretty minimal compared to other communities. And so we have, of course, dedicating funding in the CIP for greenway facilities, developing a greenway maintenance plan for greenways maintained by town. So the LDO does specify for greenways that are built by developers and are maintained by HOAs, there is a maintenance plan in place. but also as the town continues to build out and grow the Greenway network, it will be important to have that standard operating procedures for maintenance for town facilities. Also, again, with the bicycle plan, very similarly, having staff training and resources related to Greenway infrastructure really helps as the projects are being developed. And then for the LDO recommendations, so expand the definition of greenways to include side paths. We do have several side path recommendations in the Greenway Plan, so it'll be important to incorporate that definition into the Greenway definition. Also, for sidewalk requirements, right now, greenways are not allowed to be constructed in the right-of-way in place of required sidewalks. And so where there are side paths proposed in the plan, we do recommend that we allow side paths to be constructed in the right-of-way in place of required sidewalks. And then this last recommendation is a provision of public access. So right now, greenways are allowed in sewer easements, but with this is kind of a slight tweak to that. And basically, it's this provision of public access incorporates allowing greenways to be, greenways shall be allowed within the right-of-way whenever an easement is drafted for all new utility, sewer, and stormwater corridors. It's always easier to have that in at the earlier stage of whenever easements are being developed to allow greenways with and permit them within the right-of-way rather than trying to go back after the fact and get an easement on top of that utility easement. Does anyone have any questions about these recommendations? Okay, so moving on to the network recommendations. So first, we are going to look at the bicycle network recommendations. So just to kind of explain the map, and yeah, we provided some maps so you can just kind of zoom in. It's always hard to see this on a PowerPoint, but oh, okay. JG said it's a third map in your packet. So for of course our existing facilities, I did include the greenways in there so we can look at connections. But then we have our existing greenway, our existing bike lane along Granite Falls Boulevard, and that's the solid the solid bright blue line. And then so for proposed recommendations, the bicycle lanes are the dashed bright blue lines. And then the separated bicycle lanes, we just have two along Granite Falls Boulevard and Main Street. Those are the darker navy blue dash lines. And then our bicycle boulevard networks are within our residential areas, making those connections to planned greenways. And those are the dashed purple lines. And then we also have proposed intersection treatments. Those are the circles at key intersections. And so just to kind of explain the network recommendations here. These really were guided by, again, the Complete Streets approach from Rolesville Moves CTP, having discussions with town staff, with neighboring jurisdictions to make sure our recommendations align, looking at the Campo and Wake County transportation plans as well, talking with Franklin County. And so the key corridors within town for bicycle lanes, Everett Road, Rogers Road, and Burlington Mills, and Young as well. We also have side path recommendations on those. We did want to keep the recommendations that were included in the Rolesville Move CTP because it was such a newly adopted plan and was just vetted by the public and adopted by the town. But also, with the current practice is, again, kind of like what I explained earlier, is making sure that our bicyclists are safe, feel safe and comfortable biking. And so having fully protected facilities like side paths is the ideal, is the long-term recommendation. But for, shorter, medium term, where we can put in bicycle lanes to improve safety, I have left in those bicycle lane recommendations where we do have side path recommendations as well. And also there was a desire from the community members to have both bicycle lanes and side paths for folks who did prefer to bike within the roadway corridor. And then looking a little bit further out, when we spoke with town staff and community members, and then also with neighboring jurisdictions, there was a desire to improve bicycle tourism and having that a draw here. It's a huge draw on the western side of the triangle, Orange County, a lot of recreational bicyclists, and well, not very far from Rolesville, just on the border in Franklin County, is the NC Bike Route 2. There are several state bike routes within the state of North Carolina. So right neighboring to Rolesville is NC Bike Route 2. So we included recommendations for bicycle lanes in our areas kind of outside town limits, and we've incorporated that to include recommendations that were already in the Wake County, with the Campo MTP, and then we've added bicycle lane recommendations to make those connections to those recommended bike lane networks that were already in the MTP. And then for the proposed collector streets that's in the Rolesville moved MTP, we also added bicycle facilities, bike lane recommendations to make sure that we are fully connecting the network and taking that complete streets approach. Does anyone have any questions on these network recommendations?
So it seems like the proposals are well connected on this side, but not so much on this side.
Well, so
It looks,
we met with Wake Forest and Wake County folks. And so we wanted to make sure that our recommendations matched up with theirs. And so for Jones Dairy Road, Chalk Road, also Rogers, Forestville, Burlington Mills, Wake Forest is proposing side paths along those streets. So when we get to our Greenway network recommendations, we have side path recommendations, so that way the recommendation is the same across,
gotcha.
Jurisdictional borders.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
So yeah, Wake Forest has been a real help throughout this planning process. Their town staff has provided information with us and met with us, and we really wanted to make sure we're on the same page and also with our survey data, so many people want to get to destinations within Wake Forest, so we want to make sure it's as seamless as possible for people moving between the two communities.
Gotcha.
A question for you. Will all of the proposed bike lanes or boulevards, will they have, as well as the markings on the ground, but will they actually have signage so that way that the drivers will be cautious?
Yes, oh wow, it's so small. But yeah, if you could see right here, I wish I would have blown this up. But yeah, all bike lanes include signage as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the bike network recommendations before we move on to greenways? Oh, and also, for Main Street, just to show you, we have the Main Street side path on either side of the separated the separated bike lane, and so basically we have a separated bike lane from Burlington Mills to Young Street. And so because Main Street is being redeveloped with bicycle lanes already, and we have the site plans and we've reviewed those, we felt that it was important to continue with that design and just improve the design by adding separated bike lanes, improve the recommendation and add separate bike lanes rather than disrupt the design of that corridor. Because, ideally you would have a side path all the way through since we have side paths on both sides. But because this is the town core and there's gonna be a lot of new development and there's also this new streetscape improvement, we felt that it was important to keep with that current design as it is.
I have one clarification. Let me check this off. One clarification, on Burlington Mills Road, where the proposed bike lane is, and it stops at Main Street, that's gonna be a new street there, right?
Yeah, so the recommendation follows the new street, and that's why there's no recommendation at the current street as it is now.
Right, but there's no continuation of a recommended bike path to connect to this? I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing. I thought this was gonna go into the, what you call the development, Walbrook. Is there something here? Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and also, we do have a map that has both the bicycle recommendations and the Greenway network combined so that you can see how they all connect.
There we go.
But we just felt like it was important to kind of separate them here so that you can kind of see the distinction between the two.
I'm with you now, sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Okay, well, I guess we'll move on to the Greenway Plan Network recommendations. So, for this network, we have our existing Greenway, existing greenways in the solid green line. We have our proposed greenways and side paths as the dashed lighter green line. And then all the darker dashed green lines are greenways that either are currently in development by developers or they will be built by developers as their developments get underway. And so, like I'd mentioned, connections with Wake Forest and Raleigh, we have side paths along all the major roadway corridors, Burlington Mills, Forestville, Rogers, Chalk, Jones Dairy, and Waite. And then, of course, Young Street and Raleigh Road as well. And then Fowler Road, especially since this will become a business district for the town, we have included side path recommendations there. And then we've incorporated all the major recommendations from the Wake County Greenway Plan, and those are the Perry Creek Greenway, the Cedar Creek Greenway, the Buffalo Creek, and the Harris Creek and Tom's Creek Greenway as well. And for most of our greenways, just to note, greenways do require additional analysis, usually a feasibility study, to determine the exact alignment. So these are really kind of bigger picture, high level, this is where the connections that we want to make. But in terms of the exact alignments, like which side of the stream it would be on and so forth, all of those decisions would be made during the feasibility and design process. So just like that's one thing just to note for y'all.
So on the Greenway Plan Network recommendations, it appeared to me that somehow we want to bike across the bypasses in several places. Is that?
Yeah, so those, so I'll show you here. So we do have the intersection treatments. So of course, getting to Fraser Farm, there's that culvert that will get us under the overpass there.
I think the culverts make sense, but like East Young Street is one I'm questioning. Are you recommending biking across?
Yeah, well, right now, from what JG has told me, there are plans with NCDOT to improve that intersection to allow for crossing. The problem with super streets is that it makes it very difficult to have crossings at grade.
Yeah, what we're proposing is just a walking sidewalk type thing, and we don't usually bike on sidewalks?
Yeah, so for these situations with super streets, you either have, a bridge or a tunnel, or yes, you would have some sort of crossing like that where a bicyclist most likely would have to dismount and walk through that crosswalk if it's at grade. It is unfortunate, but with the constraints with the super street design, if pedestrian and bicycle crossings are not incorporated into the design during that process of when the street is being redesigned into a super street, it makes it very difficult to retrofit just based on the way that the super street is designed. And especially with the specific ones for Lewisburg Road, the turns, the spacing between the turns there are not wide enough to where you could include, an at-grade crossing. Whereas in other areas, I know like Maryland DOT, they do a really good job where they have cross sections that are wide enough to where you can make that accommodation, and they do that at the beginning of the process. And so we still do have a ways to go with NCDOT so that we can make it to where the spacing at the intersection allows for, crossings and allows for, protected crosswalks there.
So this particular one on East Young Street, should that be denoted as a bridge then or something?
Well, we were thinking about that, our engineers, but, in having discussions with town staff, it looks like there is a plan in place to provide, that area will be redesigned to allow for at-grade crossing, so you'll have like a crossing there.
Yeah, but it's a sidewalk crossing though, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, yes. So that's the most cost-effective option. To put a bridge, so I did meet with our engineering staff to put a bridge there because of the grades on either side of Lewisburg Road, and to maintain at least a 5% minimum, for the ADA slopes requirement. You would have to have a switchbacks and an approach, like basically people would kind of have to go kind of out and then come back in to be able to make the approach to go over Lewisburg Road, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like you'll have to do kind of a switchback design or a design that's further enough out to kind of slowly increase or decrease the slope to make it up to the height level of what the bridge would need.
Right. Yeah, I think, Kelly, I never mentioned to DOT, and I never heard them say that bikes are going to be allowed to go through there. We need to follow up on that probably.
So otherwise, she's saying it's going to be a,
Well, as a crosswalk,
You can walk the bike.
yeah, you can walk the bike. They can't tell you that you couldn't do that,
You would treat it as a pedestrian, you get off and walk the bike.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that. We have that in New York, a lot of bridges. You have to walk your bike across.
And the current plan shows from the bypass to Coy Road as a side path is how we have it currently designed.
Once you get across. Once you get across. Yeah.
And the
If you
bridge
get
you were,
If you get across.
the bridge you were talking about, is that a pedestrian bridge?
Yes.
Yeah. Just
So-
clarifying.
So I understand you'll need studies and this and that with the Greenway Plan, but my biggest issue is I know how developers are going to look at this if we put this out there immediately. If I buy the property, let's say as an example, on the north side of Tom's Creek, and that Greenway is shown on the bottom side of Tom's Creek, me as a developer, I'm going to say, well, I don't have to worry about that. So how do you make it so that developers know that that might be an option on their side? Like, is there a way to write that into the LDO? I mean, it's just, I don't want to, they're going to take it for face value. They're not, they don't care
Yeah.
that it might move here or might move there.
I can go back and ask our LDO expert at McAdams if there's specific language on that. But usually it really is about making that connection, and so you do have to stress to the developer that this is required, that connection between there. And then also, if this is a major concern for the town, we can add a line, above Tom's Creek, and where we can put in the recommendations, which would specify in a chart that it'd be either or. So we can, I'll go back and ask our LDO expert on that.
Okay.
And then we can also make sure that we have language in the plan that specifies that connection's required.
And I know there's not, I don't want to go option A, option B, option C for everything on there, but I know there's some specific areas we want to maybe take a look at.
But we can do that. That's
Yeah.
something that we can do. We can add, kind of like what I mentioned with the bike recommendations, where we kind of have long-term as a side path and then short-term as a bicycle lane on some of our major roadway corridors. For our greenways, if we need to include a couple of options, we can do that.
Okay, all right.
Kind of while he's on that topic, I know, and I don't know what limited or how the areas got in here, because, we got a lot in some of these plans that's way out into the watershed. I'm not sure we ever be responsible to do anything anyway. But then I see places like Mitchell Mill Road, which, we're going to have major developments north of Mitchell Mill that has no plans at all for any connectivity on Mitchell Mill from a Greenway perspective. It does from a bike perspective,
Yeah, and we talked to the the city of Raleigh about that, if they were gonna update their recommendations along Mitchell Mill and have side path. And in our interjurisdictional meeting, they did say that they would keep the bicycle facility, so we decided to keep the bicycle facility as well to match that recommendation. But if this is an important corridor for the town and making sure that we have Greenway connectivity, we can add that recommendation if that's something that y'all feel very strongly about.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, sorry, was there any other, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Any other comments? No? Okay. So for the, just to quickly go over the second phase of community engagement, we're having 3 phases. So we tabled at Fall Fest and we had really great participation. I talked to about 100 participants, and there were several more people who came up to look at the maps, and people provided a lot of comments. And so we were able to get priorities determined, and also comments on the network recommendations that you've see there. And then also we did a second survey, again, asking people to provide comments on the network recommendations and provide their priority corridors.
I was wondering how you had so many participants, so you did it at the Fall Festival.
Yeah, so we
Okay.
found that, doing the kind of standard, evening meeting, you'll get, maybe if you're lucky, 20 to 40 people. But if you're out there where the people are and you table all day, like at a festival, it's a fun environment and people are more open and willing to provide comments. And so we've definitely been doing that way more on all of our plans than kind of the traditional way of, having a standard town meeting.
Okay, that makes sense now.
But we'll likely for our last public meeting, we'll probably have more of a traditional setup since it's the draft plan so people can see it. But, if there's an event and another opportunity to table like we did at Fall Fest, we would choose that over a traditional town meeting. So now heading into the priorities. So We have priority projects for both the Greenway Plan and the Bicycle Plan, and we've developed prioritization criteria by using our plan goals. That was really important. So we created a prioritization matrix. We looked at how each project met each of the plan goals. So, accessibility, connectivity, regional connectivity, safety, equity, and project feasibility. And then also, we added points and weighted the projects that had significant community input for those projects. So the prioritization criteria is a mix of meeting those plan goals and making sure we're connecting people to where they want to go, and then also having that strong component of community input that prioritizes the bike network and the Greenway network. So the top 10 bicycle plan projects are and again, so this is using that prioritization methodology and public input. Main Street separated bike lane is number 1. Then the East Young Street bike lane is number 2. The Granite Falls Boulevard separated bike lanes is number 3. And then number 4 is Rogers Road bike lanes, followed by Burlington Mills bike lanes. Also, next is bicycle lanes along Redford Place Drive, then Everett Road, Rolesville Road bike lanes, and then the bicycle boulevards within the Carlton Points, Villages, and Cedar Lakes neighborhoods, and then the bicycle boulevards in the Granite Falls area. Does anyone have any questions on the priority network?
So number 9 would be along Virginia Water Drive, is that?
Yes, Virginia Water Live, so that would be sharrows and signage, shared lane markings and signage. So would not mess with, any Orange Street parking or anything like that, and of course the road is wide enough to accommodate, safe bicycle travel and parking. For the Greenway Plan, again, we have 10 priority projects, but then also we have a supplement in our scope that we're going to do feasibility analysis for 3 priority projects, and that's to advance project development. So again, that's looking at the exact alignment of where the corridor needs to go to move forward with design. And again, we did the same thing for our Greenway Plan. We used the evaluation criteria guided by those plan goals and, of course, community input. So our top 10 priority Greenway projects are the East Young Street side path, the Main Street side path, Rogers Road side path, and then this Heritage East Millbridge Park Greenway connector. That's, of course, that missing link here along Rogers Road, connecting Heritage East with Millbridge Park and Sanford Creek Greenway. Then we have number 5 is the Burlington Mills side path, and then the Heritage East Chalk Road Greenway connector. This is this connection here. And then the next priority project is the Redford Place Park Young Street connector. So that's the connection between Redford Place Park, Rolesville Elementary, and then connecting to Young Street. And of course, this would tie into where the new town hall would be as well. Then the 8th is Harris Creek Greenway, and then the Redford Place Park Greenway, and that's that connection here. And then Everett Road side path.
So a question about East Young Street, that goes from the bypass to the high school, but then your sidewalk from there down. So how do you fix that?
Well, actually, there is side path proposed.
Okay.
This just becomes Rolesville Road, and it was separated as a different project because it's technically Rolesville Road. So it was kind of further down. It wasn't in the top 10, but it was still part of the green. Yeah.
All right.
So like,
Quick question.
oh, yeah. Oops.
When it's on the priority list, is this mean that these priorities are town-funded projects versus developer? Because, developer should be a priority. It should be, like Paul says, they put them in.
So these were all projects. So we had people prioritize and we put all of the projects through the criteria. So we didn't separate it out between town versus developer. So these happen to be just the top 10.
Right. So I guess that may be the job of our folks to do that because, developer put it in whenever they come. It wouldn't be something we can necessarily prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, let me see. Yeah, we can definitely, I can run the numbers. I have a spreadsheet
Yeah.
with the prioritization matrix and take out developer and then just have town and then see kind
Yeah.
of what changes.
I think that's something we can talk about internally with the Greenway. Because I think one of the earlier things you had in there, it had to do with budgeting, getting it in
Yeah.
CIP budget.
Yeah, and we're gonna have cost estimates for these projects and design considerations. And so that's another reason why we're doing priority projects. We're doing cut sheets, and so it goes into a little bit more detail. We're looking at opportunities and constraints in more detail. We're having cost estimates so that, it helps the town. It provides like a blueprint of how to move forward with these projects. Because, Young Street Side Path, that's number one. That doesn't necessarily mean that the town has to pursue that project first. It just means that that's like a high-ranking project. So once you kind of have those cost estimates, you can kind of see what are the best projects that you can move forward with and what are feasible. And then lastly, we of course have our 3 feasibility studies. So projects. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail than just our project cut sheets with these, and we're going to actually model these in CAD and have our engineers look at this and see exactly where the route alignment is. So we picked projects that were really tricky, and then the last one is actually a new, I guess kind of like a new project that was brought to us by Open Space and Greenway Committee members in January. And then Mayor, I know that you support this project as well, so you can speak to it if you'd like. But first, I'll just go through the first 2, and then we can talk about this third one, because we do need a little feedback from y'all about how to proceed with this one. So the first one, of course, is making that connection with Heritage East and Millbridge Park. We're going to have meetings with DOT on this so that we can determine what's the best crossing, if we can either do at grade, or we're also looking at the tunnel, a tunnel along the stream corridor, or a bridge. So we're kind of looking at 3 different options to make this a safe connection, because right now it's not safe. And then the second one is the Harris Creek Greenway. It's the Cedars Lake segment. So just south of this corridor here is, of course, the Point development, and this section is going to be developer built. And this is going to be our first connection in the culvert under Lewisburg Road, which will be great to have that connectivity there. And then the section north here, this will be also developer built. So this is the only section that the town has to construct in this area of the Harris Creek Greenway. But unfortunately, it's also the most difficult because of topography and other environmental constraints near the floodplain. Near the floodway, near the stream, and then also getting the topography getting up to Virginia Waters Road is going to be pretty difficult to make that connection there. So we're having our engineers look at this piece to see where the exact alignment will be for that corridor. And then so the next one is the idea of a Main Street Greenway loop kind of around the center of town. So this, we have, the Young Street Redford Place Park connector is already kind of proposed here. We have Redford Place Park Greenway. Then we have a side path along the extension of Virginia Waters, and then the side path along Burlington Mills Road. Now, this is kind of the tricky part where we kind of need your input on. So Granite Falls Boulevard, we did not have a side path recommendation here. We had separated bicycle lanes because of the constraint with the Granite Falls Boulevard extension. The right-of-way in that development, right where it reaches Burlington Mills right here, if you can see my cursor, the right-of-way is very narrow, and so we may not be able to fit a side path there. And so that's why we originally had separated bicycle lanes. But, so kind of your input from y'all is, I need kind of two things is, should we move forward with this and look at this area and see if a side path is feasible here so we can create this Main Street loop? And then also, for the scope of these extra kind of feasibility studies, this Greenway loop is actually 3 miles and would have to look at a little bit deeper study to look at the entire corridor. And so what I'm proposing is that instead of looking at the entire Greenway loop, because we just unfortunately don't have the scope for the entire loop to look at this extra feasibility, we could look at just Granite Falls Boulevard and see what's feasible as that extra project. Does that make sense? There's just some constraints along Granite Falls Boulevard that may make it difficult to have a side path where the roadway will be extended.
So you're referring to the part, excuse me, that has not yet been constructed?
Yes, that is
Right.
not because of the current right-of-way easement.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think you're dead on it. Most of the southern part of the loop is already in your plan. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
It
yeah.
may be a couple connections. I think I remember OSAG recommends connecting that little pocket park down there somehow.
Yep.
So it may be a little bit there. The northern loop, there's other options rather than doing side paths. There's some property that's going to be developed in there that you can go, I guess, northwest of the new Granite Falls and hit that natural area in there. If that ever gets developed, which I think it will, at some point in time. So yeah, I think that's something that I believe get Derek talk about. There's more than one way to skin the cat. So if you can't go side path, I agree. I mean, there's no need to keep pushing that.
So do you think that should we still have this as our third Greenway feasibility project and look at that corridor along Granite Falls? Is that still a good plan?
Yeah, I would say,
Okay.
let's task OSAG and them to look at it and see. I didn't think the original proposal was side path anyway. I may be wrong.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, so this is kind of a new addition there.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think the original had more development dependent greenways, put it rather than side.
So is this side path on both sides or just a single side?
No, it would only be on one side. And kind of what we've looked at is it would probably be on the north side.
Okay.
And, yeah,
Yeah.
well, probably on the south side, close to Main Street Park there, and then once you cross the intersection, it would switch to the north side likely. But we still have to do an analysis. That's kind of just initial kind of.
Yeah, 'cause we have a sidewalk up through there already.
Yeah, that's
There's
one
sidewalk up
thing,
through
that's
there.
one thing that confuses me about these side paths is, I see one on East Young, and I know we just had a project a couple of years ago to put a sidewalk in. Are we proposing to tear sidewalks out to put side paths in? Is that kind of what it costs to do?
Yeah.
Oh. That would be a no for me, dog.
That was such an expensive
Yeah,
project.
that's a lot of money.
So I
Yeah,
think
tear
that's
it up.
where,
I would, so one kind of good thing though, is that, for a lot of these roadways that have side paths, you know, NCDOT has a statewide complete streets policy now. And so as long as the facility is in an adopted plan, DOT has to cover that full cost of the facility. So if Young Street, if there's a roadway improvement coming up in the STIP, which I know there's not, but, you know, in the future, DOT would pay for the cost of that facility, would not go on the town whatsoever. So that's that policy was adopted statewide in 2019. So it's just starting to get, you know, implemented, you know, as projects come up. So it's pretty exciting, you know, for North Carolina. A lot of other states have this, and it's great that we have it now, because it takes the cost off of the community for these facilities that are on DOT roadways and are within DOT right-of-way.
yeah, I think just hearing the reaction from some of the board members on that we probably at some point in time need a detail of how much sidewalk we have to tear up to do
Yeah, that
these
one hasn't lost its shine yet. We can't
But
even, you can't tear
again-
that.
Do
Not
what?
even
It
faded.
hasn't lost its shine yet.
Yeah.
And Granite
Again-
Falls, I mean, I think tearing up Granite Falls too, right, on one side or something?
Yeah, well, if there, so yeah, we had originally proposed bicycle lanes there, so if we do propose side path, then yeah, you would have to,
Oh, my goodness.
most likely it would be tearing up the sidewalk and putting down asphalt.
So the one saving thing I think on that is the one side of Granite Falls doesn't have anything on it
Right.
from the Greenway up. So that's all side path. And I think from there down is sidewalk, which you could widen, I think, that way. So, I mean,
That's the south side though.
yeah, all on the
She
south
was
side.
mentioning the north
Well,
side
we
will be.
still do have to look at things, so that's just kind of an initial thought. So yeah, definitely don't take my word on the
No, and you have
exact
a
side
pinch
yet,
of an
but-
overpass there too, where you
but
don't
still
even
would
see
have
it,
to
but
tear up all the school sidewalk.
right.
But like on West Young Street, because that wasn't that with the help of DOT? Somebody remind me.
It was a grant, but
CDBG and community development block.
It wasn't DOT though?
So that's.
I'm like, can we be grandfathered in on that 2019? That's what I'm thinking about. But I mean, wouldn't it be realistic to put more of a, what do you call it, a bike lane, a protected bike lane, than to rip out sidewalk?
Well, with the best facility for that corridor, especially as Rolesville grows and the traffic volumes increase, as the traffic volumes increase of a roadway corridor, that really reduces the safety of a
Right.
bicyclist. when
For
you're coming
Rolesville Road, but I'm specifically talking about Young, before you go across the bypass.
Yeah, but even the future ADT could potentially be significant to where it creates a safety issue.
So could we have a sidewalk on the one side and side path on the other side?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
so
most
you run it
communities,
down that
you
side.
cannot, like,
On the Cedar Lake side. you're
Yeah.
talking about? Mhm.
not very many communities have side paths on both sides. I mean, it's too costly. And so a lot of communities either will just have side path on one side and a sidewalk, or sometimes side
That
path
would make sense.
on one side is the only facility that they can accommodate.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Because then it gives connectivity into downtown.
Yeah.
We ain't ripping up no concrete, we don't have to. Cost too much.
Well, I know I've taken up a lot of your time, so just for next steps is we're gonna start working on those priority cut sheets. We're gonna, we actually just started working on the feasibility analysis for the first two projects this week. So we're getting started on that. We're gonna finalize and compile the draft plan. Then we're gonna have our final steering committee meeting where we'll have the draft plan. That'll probably be in late April. And then we'll have our public meeting, in April as well for a draft plan review, and then we'll have the final plan and meeting here again in May for plan adoption for both plans. Yeah, are there any other comments or questions?
Not right now. Not for me.
So how do we, So if we had like changes with the, I guess I'm on the steering committee anyways. Do I just work directly with you if we need like option A, option B for the greenways? How do we do, okay.
Yeah, you can shoot me an email or we can set up a call and we can talk through things. And of course, we're, we have our final steering committee meeting, we have our final public meeting, so this will still be, vetted by the public one final time. So we're still in a spot to where we can make some changes and it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathleen. Before you step away, you may want to just step away for a minute. I want to see if the Parks and Recreation Board has any questions, or if you have any comments. This is the time. Come up if you don't mind, so we can get it on record and then on the mic if you don't mind.
I had a couple of questions for the two ladies before on the design of the Civic Center. If I may go with that, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the second floor of the building, they have set aside an office section. There are about 5 or 6 small offices with one entrance. And that entrance is really sort of half blocked by a counter in there too. So I'm worried about, just in case of an emergency, if that is the proper design for it. The second thing, if we are thinking, and it was mentioned, that this center could be used as an emergency storm shelter, we really have to think seriously about the toilet facilities that would be available there, because we'll be thinking about hundreds of people in there. So this is another thing that I would like to see or to ask. And finally, I would like to suggest, if I may say, urge the board to approve the scheme as soon as possible, because really the more we wait, the costlier it will become. I think all of us have noticed, observed, or read about projects that started with an X number of dollars and then it turned out to be 3 times that X. Except for that, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate the comments. And
I'd like to address something that he said, which is really true in regards to bathrooms and showers, because I do a lot of volunteer work with the Red Cross, and they typically go to schools because they have it. So that's not something that I think we should really get too involved in, because it can be very costly to the town, and let it, let the process work its way through the schools.
yeah, I agree. I guess it could be extreme emergency where, they have to have another spot. But yeah, it shouldn't be the primary, I don't think. You're exactly right. Any other questions, comments? She gave you permission to come up? Is that what I saw? She nodded.
I just,
Thought we had a chance to be out of here soon.
no, I just wanted to make sure that anybody else wanted to come up before, I chew up all your time, since, I'll probably do that. No, I think there's a lot to unpack here. There really is. Some of it is in the details and some of it is not. My first comment is, my personal interest in seeing these lines drawn a little bit more clearly. I think it's important to see them drawn with property lines on them. And I think, to Paul's point earlier, I think it's very important for us to understand where these ideas are going to be and put them on paper so that we can see them. Because the next thing that we have to do is figure out, and I don't know if McAdams can help us with this or whether we have to figure out as a town, but we need to figure out how to get this in front of the developers before they give us their conceptual drawings of how the property that they're trying to develop is going to look. I've spoken to 4 developers over the last couple months on projects that are already in play, and if they had these kinds of things in front of them early on, I wouldn't be fighting tooth and nail to figure out how to get greenways put in this town. So these need to get somewhere in the system, the systematic approach to new development, They need to get in there early so the developers are designing around them and that we're not putting these greenways around the developments. So that's why the town loop concept, for example, it is kind of by default going onto a street because it's not getting in front of developers early enough. There is enough undeveloped land on that north side of Main Street to wiggle it around. And I think that's important because one of the biggest benefits of Main Street Park that everybody loves is how shaded it is. And that's why it's always been so popular. And I think our greenways need to reflect that same way. If we want people to use them, we need to have them in those protected areas. We need to be greenway buffers on both sides of it so that you feel like you're in a natural setting when you're running around this town loop, whether you're running, walking, or riding a bicycle. And keeping us away from a street is going to be more ideal. So I think there's an opportunity for that Main Street loop to still meander through the town under that protection of trees and not along the side of a road. And I think we can do that, and I think we can talk about doing that. And if we see these plans on property-lined maps, it'll be easier to see that vision. And then the developers won't be asking questions, or we won't have these long negotiations trying to figure out how to make things work. And, you know, in particular, I know it's already been brought up, Tom's Creek is a little bit inaccurate in that respect. Harris Creek is missing some pieces. And most recently, with Publix coming on board, this section coming out of Wall Creek Park is, again, kind of not as accurate because it's using part of Carlton Point's Greenway that actually isn't going to be adopted by the town. So there's some inaccuracies there that make this look a little bit deceptive to people who aren't as familiar with how it all comes together. So those are some important things I think we need to iron out before this really gets adopted. And I don't think they're big issues to do, but I just think they're very important in order to make sure that when the developers look at these maps, there are no questions. We're not fighting uphill battles, like I said. The other comment I want to make about is the priorities. I think it'll be nice to see the town priorities separated from the development priorities, and I think that comment was already made, so I think that's going to be very helpful to see. I also think when it comes to the bicycle lanes and the boulevards, I think the boulevards are, what are they like, using those low-hanging fruit kinds of things? So even though they may be lower down on the priorities, they might be something we might want to look at first, because if it's just a couple signs and some street paintings, it starts to give the citizens of the town a little bit of an idea, like this is going to come. So start getting used to this, these wayfinding signs, get used to this change in behavior, the way you drive through our town. And those are going to be the real easy solutions, even if they're not at the top of the list. And I think they're pretty easy to reach. So I think between, you know, all of that, I think, you know, we're really close to getting this right. And I think with a little bit more detail, we'll get this to a point to where it's going to really come together real nicely, and we will have a really nice network that all the other towns around us will come to enjoy rather than go out from. And I think that's going to be really important for this town. And that's pretty much all I have, I think, for that. Any questions or anything?
I was going to say, I think that was a great point that you said about the low-hanging fruit, because we've kind of done that with the wayfinding signage that we have in town, period.
Right.
So people started to see, oh, something's actually happening. So I think that's a good point. And I also, address your first point about kind of getting the jump ahead of developers being more proactive, I think Parks and Rec and planning need to work closer together. Because even if we adopt this tonight, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, because it's not done yet, right?
Right.
So I do think Parks and Rec and planning need to partner closer. When they come with that initial concept, then JG and Meredith need to be having a conversation so that we're looking at some of those options that are there. So you get them thinking about it, even if we have not adopted it yet, because they'll listen if they want to be here. So just an idea.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think that is the point, right? I think the point is to get these plans in front of the developers so that those plans, when they come in, we're not fighting to put the trails in.
Sure.
We're having the discussion about, well, why did you move it to the other side of the creek versus this side of the creek?
Yep.
And then we can have those kinds of conversations rather than,
Up front.
why is it not there?
Yep.
So, yeah, that's
would agree. Great
exactly to
point.
the point.
Or it don't connect to nothing.
Right, right,
We've seen those.
right.
We got one in the village.
Thank you.
We got a
Thank you for
problem in
something.
the village.
Yes, come up.
Really
Join
just
the fun.
More of a comment than anything. So as somebody who's fairly new to Rolesville but grew up in a small town of similar size in Northern California, the small town atmosphere is really important to me and my family. Raising kids in junior high and high school has been a great experience here. But one of the things that's made it a small, very close-knit community for us is kind of the organic relationships that we've developed with people through the Parks and Rec department, playing sports or school, but more so than school, really, the Parks and Rec department. So the community events, we tend to make a lot of friends because we find people with common interests, common lifestyles. And I think that the trail system would really augment that, because I think as people drive from place to place, they sort of isolate themselves. But if people can find a way to walk or bike to each of these places, that would really help take this to the next level of bringing the community to a whole nother tier of continuity, and would really bring it closeness to people building those relationships. And I think that would speak a lot to having a very close community, not just one that's kind of well-designed. So just
Yeah.
wanted to make that comment.
So just sum up what I hear in just a few words. You think continuity and connection with the communities is important.
I do. I think I don't know my own neighbors near as well as I know other families that are involved in the other sports programs or community events. And I think having that, specifically speaking to the trails, and being able to bring people from neighborhood to neighborhood or neighborhood to a public space or a retail location or a commercial space, I think that's really going to help build and augment those opportunities. So.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
that. Any others, real quick? Any more? Kathleen, I did not hear any questions you have to answer, so from the board, any other questions for Kathleen? Come up, if you don't mind, one last time. Well, I really appreciate you put a lot of hard work in this, I can tell. I think as, you know, our parks people are more familiar with it than this board, for sure. You know, I think, you know, good compliments, we're almost there. I think you got a good forward plan, and appreciate all you do. Great project so far, so thank you for that.
Well, thanks so much. Yeah, it's been great talking with y'all tonight, and of course, great working with Kelly and JG on the plan and the OSAC committee as well. So thank y'all.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
So going forth, I think it's some things we need to do. We need, you know, I think our Parks and Rec group has said is some things we need to make sure we consider. I know, Paul, you're the liaison to that. One thing I was thinking about to help you, so you're not a one-person show, is to point a kind of a committee to help you with that. So, you know, you're not, you know, like I said, alone. And I asked April, and she said that she would graciously do that. You still, after hearing all this, are you still okay with?
For now.
For now? Because I think we're almost there. I think a very good job has been done on this, but I do think, and I hear Commissioner Sutton talks about, you know, the park group and the planning group, you know, coming together. And you know, and I'm going to task you two to kind of think about that too. A lot of communities do a lot of different ways, and Meredith has seen it done a lot of different ways. And we can kind of talk about, and I'm going to task you guys to figure out, you know, how do we get this in front of the developers, you know, when they come in and ask for, because they don't come into the parks in the rec department, they come into the planning department. And we need to make sure that happens. So appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Kathleen, JG, I know you put a lot of work into it. Thank you for, the work that you've done. And, we've been talking about a Greenway plan for how long? I see you shaking your head. How many years?
At least 10.
We've been working with Greenways since before I got here, so that's 20-plus years.
Oh,
And
I
I'm
was
only
thinking 10.
29, so.
Right. So I think we're getting close to it. I think you guys have made some good suggestions, and
It's grown these 20 years. It's been going great 20 years.
good.
We've got so much potential to make it better.
There you go. So appreciate y'all getting involved. Thank you to new people getting involved. I really think, I know Kathleen got a lot of input, but to me, I leverage a lot on you guys because you guys, been out there. And I don't know if anybody has walked the community more than Derek has, He knows every nook and cranny and rock out there. So I appreciate that. Thank y'all for all your hard work and appreciate that. So with that, board, let's take a quick 10-minute break. And we will come back at 20 to 9. And I think we got a very short, ending to this. I see Amy nodding back there. So once we come back, hopefully Goal will be out of here by 9. So 10-minute break. Thank you. Appreciate it. I call back to order on the town board's workshop meeting. Next item we have is the Americans Disabilities Act Transition Plan. Amy, I think you're going to address us on that, please?
Not a long item to wrap up your evening, should be fairly quick. So just updating this item was something that was brought to you all almost a year and a half ago. You adopted in July of 2021. No, 2020, excuse me. We've all lose track of the years these days, don't we? So around July of 2020, you adopted an ADA transition plan. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is a piece of federal legislation that provides certain non-discrimination and opportunities to individuals with disabilities. There are several chapters or titles to this act, and Title II relates to government services. So when a community gets to have about 50 employees, is time for that community to adopt what's called an ADA transition plan. And so 2020, associated with our receipt of DOT funds, the town did in fact adopt that ADA transition plan. So, and so Title II relates to the government, and it says that you will provide equal opportunity for individuals to participate in services, programs, and activities. So that transition plan that you adopted has really two big components to it. One is a policy, and the other was a self-evaluation, okay? So I'm gonna review those quickly. The policy that you adopted, it's pretty short and sweet, but it's important. And that policy sets out that, and affirms that you will follow ADA, no non-discrimination in employment, provide effective communication. A good example of that is if somebody said, I'm hearing impaired, gave the clerk adequate notice, she could bring in a sign language interpreter for a meeting. And then finally, it affirms that the town would make reasonable accommodation and modifications to programs and services for those with disabilities. So again, it's pretty short and sweet. It's consistent with what other North Carolina communities have, but a very important part of this. But where the ADA transition plan spends most of its time is this self-evaluation. To help us with this, in 2020, right as the pandemic hit, we had hired a firm out of Texas called Accessology. They came in and did an evaluation of our public facilities to determine where we needed to make some improvements to comply with ADA requirements. Some of the things that they looked at, and you have some nice visuals here to go along with it. They looked at parking areas, they looked at signage, height, placement, is it adequate? They looked at sidewalks and paths. This was a good example of a path going up to a park shelter that perhaps maybe didn't quite meet the grade requirements needed for wheelchair access. They looked in our facilities, they looked at rooms and hallways, they looked in the restrooms, looked at ours. Well, now they didn't really look too much at our streets and sidewalks, but that is an important component of our self-evaluation. And then they looked at other amenities. For instance, this park bench in one of our parks, without having a asphalt or concrete path to get to this bench, it makes it less accessible to those that have physical disabilities. So they did this evaluation. They came up with roughly $300,000 worth of improvements. So our plan has been to address these improvements over the next 10 years with annual appropriations, just slowly chipping away at this list and making and transitioning our facilities to being more ADA accessible. So tonight, that sort of catches you back up on what happened back in July of 2020. So tonight, what I really wanted to do was talk about what's happened since you first adopted that plan. So first thing we had was the police department renovation that took place last fiscal year. With that, we were able to address many, if not all, of the items that were on the ADA improvement list for the police department facility. I think the only ones we did not address were ones that were in the parking lot, because it is a leased facility. We don't own the parking lot for that building, so we were not able to address those. Second item I want to note is this winter, showed the photographs of some restrooms. There were a lot of small things, you know, like the paper towel dispensers too high, right? Or some of the hooks on the inside of the toilet stalls need to be lowered. Placement of toilet roll dispensers, things like that. Some simple things that we can do. And so our public works staff during these winter months are going to be spending some time alleviating and remedying some of those issues, both for Town Hall, for our community center next door, and over at the police department. Third piece of progress, you could say, is that we did sell our facilities that were up at the town center area, one of which was 105A West Young Street, where we did some programming, rented out facility to places. That had quite a number of items on its list, and with the sale of that, that's what takes care of those. The reason I want to mention that is because, you know, eventually we'll be building these new facilities, some of which we've talked about tonight. Our Public Works building's another example. But as we build new facilities, they will be incorporating current ADA requirements and should be compliant and accessible to all types of individuals. Next, I want to point out the Old Town resurfacing. As we go through our annual resurfacing program, we are looking at curb ramps. If you notice, when you get to the sidewalk, there's a little bit of there's the ramp there. It makes them sidewalks more easily accessible from the streets. So we do remedy those and make those appropriate for use. And then finally, there are several curb ramps in the NCDOT system. Main Street, Young Street, Rogers Road are the primary ones. And they actually are starting, I believe they sent us notice they got out here today or tomorrow. Yeah, so we've got that DOT project is underway as well, that they're correcting some of those.
What about the Main Street project? Would that be correcting some?
There are 40 ramps on the Main Street project.
To be corrected?
Yes.
Cool.
All right, and then, so that's what we've done to date, but obviously, as we go through this next budget process and in the years to come, we'll be budgeting, continuing to budget funds for ADA improvements to finish out the rest of that list.
I do have a question. I can't quite remember, but didn't somebody come here, a citizen came here and had spoke about the playground itself? Wasn't there somebody who talked about the playground, Sheila? Yeah.
What was it about?
It was about, like, she said something about handicapped kids and having accessibility to the different
The playground isn't ADA accessible. Like, there's no equipment.
yeah. Is there anything, are we doing anything with that?
Is that part of this
I
project?
would really like us.
Yeah, I don't know. I know when we talked about our budget process, talking about some of the future replacement playground equipment, you know, that might be something for the town to consider at that time, of finding some things that would address all types of abilities.
More accessible, more inclusive. And there are some grant funds available out there nationally and maybe statewide. So we did talk about we need to start looking at our playgrounds, and that would be a good idea to include that and refurbish it to make it more inclusive.
I think we should, not in 10 years, though. I mean,
Right.
because we are growing.
I don't disagree. It needs to happen sooner.
Yeah, so that was my question too. What was the total they gave us for what we needed?
I want to say, my notes here said that it added up to 300,000.
Okay. And I'd like to see us like move that up in the budget. Like, I don't want it, like you said, 10 years is too long.
Too long
We're a
for,
growing community. We need to,
exactly.
yeah.
Does it include sidewalks, or is that under something else? Because I'm just thinking, when I say sidewalks, when I say sidewalks, I'm talking about where the sidewalk is uneven. So I'm thinking about somebody in a wheelchair, they want to get out in the sun, and they come to that point. That could be a hazard. It's a hazard for when you're walking, much less a wheelchair. So is that part of this, or is that under something different?
That's just a maintenance.
Okay, just
item.
general maintenance.
Yep. Mhm.
Gotcha, okay.
It needs to be, so if you see those, quickly let us know.
With the
So-
little pink markings on them?
Yes.
I've seen them when I'm
And we
walking.
should have gotten most of those addressed.
Yeah, 'cause I think they're in the villages like a week or two ago.
They
Yeah.
are.
On
They were
Redford.
taking care of those last couple weeks.
I haven't walked up here lately. I've been in the village, but I'll walk and let you know.
So that's falling under the category of maintenance, you said?
Regular maintenance.
Correct, because those just occur.
Okay, so,
And they're trip hazards, And so if we know
Tell me
and
about it.
identify them, we need to address them.
I lost my coolness walking one time and stumbling up the sidewalk. But I'm going to digress just for a few seconds more on the sidewalks. Does it ever, like Sheila said, does it ever fall under that category, number one? And number two, once the town corrects it, will it now fall under the HOA to keep an eye on trees and, what do you call them, roots and the town? Huh?
That's a good point about the trees,
Sidewalks are the town's responsibility.
even with
But the
trees.
trees were planted by the HOA.
Tree being the plan, so.
Yeah, there's a summary. So we do put this on the website because it is a fairly, it can, so there are groups that are out there and want to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. There is a summary in here, so if you want to find it on the website, and we're happy to get it to you directly
That's
as well.
fine. If it's on the website, that's fine.
But for anybody who might be listening, very bottom of every web page, at the very bottom right, there should be a little link that says accessibility. And it goes right to our ADA page, has some information about who to contact, how to file a grievance, that sort of thing. But within the ADA plan itself, there is a summary of what their findings were. Yep.
Thank you.
So actually, I'm about done. The last thing is to make an update to the ADA transition plan. So I will be transitioning this responsibility to our assistant town manager, Eric Marsh. And also, we need to update our internal contact for any ADA issues with our new HR director. So if there's no objections, just administrative update, we'll make those changes to the plan.
Great.
No objections.
Great, that's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions for Amy?
That was good. Good presentation.
I would like to make a comment.
Okay.
3 years when I got here and there was no transition plan, I looked around and said, who's going to do it? And gave Amy the keys. And so I want to thank Amy for everything she's done to this effort up to this point. And good job, and your board supporting this. It is an important document. I just put a thought together when Paul said something. I'm going to probably make a modification to my budget recommendation. But so thank you, everybody, for doing this. It is an important piece, and then it's a reoccurring, ongoing dialogue, and how do we better community for inclusiveness. So we want to keep on working on it, and so thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Amy.
No problem. And I just want to put a plug into, I don't know how many different hats Amy has worn over the years, just filling in the gaps. I think she's done everything except for maybe being the police chief. She hadn't had that experience yet, so maybe.
Maybe a little public works.
Yeah, I mean, just about everything. And just appreciate that, Amy. I know. I know as we talk tonight, we got these buildings and stuff, and financial duties are getting bigger and bigger, and I know you're doing a great job at that, your core job as well. But it's great to have new people in here to kind of spread the wealth a little bit, right? So, but appreciate all you've done. You've done a great job. Thank you much for that. Kind of echo that. So with that, a couple closing items I want to mention to you folks real quick. This one is semi-awareness, and also maybe, I'm kind of garnering your support on. Many of y'all know the name George Taylor. If you, just to jog your memory, he was an African-American that was lynched back 11/5 of 1918. Which close to 104 years ago, actually happened near Rolesville. Actually, the area is still in the unincorporated part of our community and very close to the high school out there. No doubt in my mind, it will one day be, in town. We will eventually annex it, and it will be in Rolesville. And I'm sure when that happens, our park and rec department will be looking at, what type of, they're working hard on outdoor museums and stuff, and, something like that may happen then. If that happens that one day and we annex it. So where are we at today and what's happened presently? There's a group that's called Wake County Community Remembrance Project. They are a community coalition that works on reconciliation. And they've done a lot of work over that. This was done prior to the 100th anniversary. They were working 2 or 3 years prior to that. So, probably 7, 8 years ago. They do a lot of work with high schools. I think at one time Rolesville High School was involved in it, but they may not be at the time.
Middle schools.
Huh?
It's really with the middle schools.
Yeah, it's a middle school involved in it. So a lot of the schools have been involved with that project over many years. And a lot of work has gone into it. And some of you know Terry Little. She runs the Little Museum. And she has done a tremendous amount of work on the history of the event and gathering facts on it, doing writings, and she has a lot of memorabilia, in her museum. Some of you may have heard about an organization called Equal Justice Initiative. They kind of fight for injustice, but they also have in Montgomery, Alabama, a museum and memorial. I don't know if anybody ever been to that or not. But in that museum, there's 4,400 African Americans' names that's honored that was injustice killed, that without justice taking place. Many of them was lynched, but there other murders and type things happened. And one of those is the one I was talking about here. So so there's a project that they put this project together and they sent this stuff down and they got these museum items, but their overall goal is to one day bring that back to the community it came from, and that's kind of where we're at today. Is how do we do that? Where do we display it? How do we make it work? Because like I said, the long-term goal is for it to be a community thing rather than in Montgomery, Alabama. So over the period of, I guess, last couple years, I've talked a lot with Vicki Adamson. Do y'all know her? She's on Wake County, Board of Commissioners. Some of the ideas that we had was, to incorporate it into the new library, the Wake County Library, whenever that gets built, that it would be, a very good place to bring it back, to. And she's taken it a little bit further. She likes the idea, and actually, she's thinking it would be more than just George Taylor. It'd be more like a historic injustice hall or wing or room or something that has history of more than just that. She actually thinks it could be something that would draw people to come and visit. Her thinking is. So this group I was talking about, this community group, they did a presentation to Wake County Board of Commissioners a week or so ago, and kind of pitching the library concept to them. And I think the board was very open to it. And some of y'all know Matt Calabria. He called, so I think he didn't say so, but I think he's been kind of assigned as a board person to kind of follow through on, the presentation and stuff. And so he called, and he's basically what he's asking for is, Wake County's gonna take it to the next step, which means get the staff of Wake County involved in the concept, thinking about how they do it, think about, what the next step is. But he's sensitive to make sure that they don't run with it, Wake County don't run with it if the town of Rolesville don't support it, them doing that. And I personally said I don't think that's an issue. Basically what he's looking for is me to just send him a letter, stating that, our town is not in any opposition what Wake County wants to do in putting a memorial in the library, that we would support that and we wouldn't be against it in any way. And I told him I thought you as a board would be totally in agreement with that, pretty much. So So unless I hear opposition, I'm planning on just sending him a note saying, you know, we have no desire to oppose, you know, whatever the Wake County staff and them coming up with to do in that library if they do something along those lines.
So that means in this conversation, they're saying they're building the library?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what?
Is that part of the conversation?
I think so, well,
Okay.
yeah, maybe,
Let's
and I
go
think
seal
that
that in writing.
and I always, you know, I always thought, you know, that would also be another justification to get the library
Yeah.
going, so.
Let's get it
I
moving.
think that it is, but let me just also say that there's another entity that would like to have this.
Memorial?
Yes, there's two. There's a memorial, and there's a, something else that they want to place in a park before it comes to Rolesville to help garner up excitement and support for going to Rolesville. So if they set it someplace else first, I forget what the smaller version of what they're trying to do. They set it up there first, it will direct people with like some type of a notation that it will soon be in Rolesville when the library is built. I would say, I spoke with one of the commissioners as well, and that was one of my questions. Also, we're going to get a library. Well, we're not on the, I guess we're not on the books for another 4 or 5 years, maybe. I think that's what it was.
24/5 is kind of what I'm hearing.
Right, so I'm sorry, 24, 25, right, so a couple of years. But there is someplace else that's saying that they want it, but I think the commissioners are feeling that it should go to Rolesville, because Rolesville, it happened here, not, I just don't want to say the name of the other place.
Yeah, and I
but-
think that's what the, I think, you know, my involvement, I've, you know, been to some of the meetings as well as you. I think they want the community to reconcile. And, you know, and they look at it as Rolesville community. And one of the things that, you know, the Equal Justice Museum requires the community to reconcile in some way before they even let it come back. So yeah, it's a little thing around that, but not hearing in opposition, I'm gonna move forward with that if everybody, you know, I see nods, and I don't think it's,
Did you mention that there's money involved?
no, I didn't get any.
There's money involved that would come from the county for
Yeah.
this. So it won't really cost Roseville. I'm guessing,
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't think it will. I think, you know, that museum, I mean, if it ends up in the library, that, you know, that's their library, and I'm hoping.
But I mean, to
hoping
create
we'll-
it, you know,
Yeah.
to build, we don't, you know, it doesn't fall on, so that's a good thing as well.
So appreciate that, board, and you know, I told Matt, I really didn't foresee that we would have any objections anyway. One other item, and this is a real quick one. I did get a call from Sig Hutchison, the Wake County Chair, on the mandate, the mask mandate. The numbers are looking better. He told me that they weren't quite ready to relax the mandate. They was going to follow up in a couple weeks, and Kelly, this is about a week old news here, so you may have heard something recently. So, you know, and we've been getting letters, you know, Raleigh's talked about relaxing the mandate. Y'all may have heard that on the news and stuff. We got some letters, and I think y'all got copied on them from some citizens, you know, that having us look. And one of you commissioners say, you know, let's at least talk about it again. We, you know, it's due diligence to at least bring it up. So, so I'm going to ask, you know, you guys to, you know, to consider all the facts, and we can get you some facts. We can get some facts from Wake County and you know, distribute to the commissioners. Maybe Wake County may make a decision before then, but I'm thinking that we will discuss this at the first meeting next month, which is March 1st, and kind of, you know, regroup. I think, I don't even think, Dan, you was on the board, you know, last time we discussed it, so, you know, you'll be new at it. Huh?
I was here in the audience.
You was here, okay. So,
So I have a question. So he and Marion talked, right? Are they going back to no mask in Raleigh? I never heard what the outcome on that.
but they did a side thing that relaxed it in some place,
In Raleigh?
some conditions, you know, like if you stable and not walking around or something, you can, you can remove it. And I'm not exactly sure, we've looked for that wording and stuff, and we haven't been able to find anything on it. So I'm not exactly sure how it would distribute it, but we haven't been able to find anything on what was said it was done, but
The last update I heard on the news, now this was last week, was Mayor Baldwin said they'd revisit it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the last thing I heard. They wanted to get some more details, but unless there's been another update, that was the last thing I
I
heard.
think they're 1 week away from revisiting. The two are gonna get back together,
Yeah,
so watch next week.
gotcha.
and we may hear that before our meeting, so kind of help us direct. So with that, board, great job tonight. I think we got a lot done, running just a few minutes over, but appreciate all the work. Appreciate the staff, Kelly, just give up appreciation to them on all they did. And we got a lot going on, a lot of work to do, and thanks everybody for doing that. So
I like this time frame. I like the earlier start and the earlier stop.
Yeah, and I think our business meetings is in the charter to start at 7. That's something we can.
No, I was just saying for the work session, I like the
Yeah.
idea of starting earlier. If we,
I think so. I think it's in the charter.
I remember it was changed before, because remember, we used to meet on Mondays when
Yeah.
Sheila and I first got on the
Oh, yeah.
board.
Yeah.
And then I remember Frank was like, we can always change it. And we did.
Yeah, that's when every time something happened on Monday, you had to change it to Tuesday, and it was very confusing because the third Monday would be the next week sometime.
Okay.
can I just add a couple
Yeah,
things though?
sure.
Thales Academy, are we supposed to respond to you individually on that? Call you? Okay. So I have 3 things down here, and I know I've mentioned them several times. I just don't want them to get lost. Define affordable housing for Rolesville. Is that on our work session for next month?
With the planning board,
Yes.
could be a planning board.
Okay. And then this may be a planning board. These other 2 probably are planning board as well. Status of unstarted developments. I see, and I love the FYI. Thank you, staff. It's beautiful. I love the pictures. I love the updates. The planning one is really beautiful. But it shows the development projects that are projected to have permits in 2022. I'd like to know when those were approved. Because I'm really concerned about developments that get approved, and then 2 years later, we're still sitting. And I'm not going to say the S word that you don't like, Kelly, but you know what I'm talking about? So developments that have been approved, but they have not started. Maybe they've cleared dirt, but there's nothing been erected yet. And then,
I don't want to interrupt you, but, since you brought it up, seemed like it's not complete, because, I see some work going on, for example, at the point. I mean, they're working out there, but according to this, they won't have any permits pulled in 2022, not planning to pull any.
None?
I doubt it because of the infrastructure depth.
They're going to be working a year before.
they're just starting to move the dirt, aren't they?
Yeah.
They haven't moved dirt yet.
They have moved dirt before.
The point?
Yeah. That's what, yeah.
They
A
have moved
while
dirt?
ago.
Oh, okay. Okay, and then my last one is the TIA process. I just don't want that lost in the shuffle.
It's in our May, March discussion.
Okay, awesome, and thanks for this book on process, I think.
Yes, so, a thought, we can talk about the next meeting, but a thought, we have a 6 to 7 time in a month from now, March 15th, so we have the planning board coming in at 7. So, we could use that time, we're gonna bring we need to use our pay plan, we need to introduce our pay plan at 6 o'clock. We're thinking about the training on this document that you have in front of you and a DEI in April. So think about that. And then I'd like to ask if you want to do it this timeline or separate.
Yeah.
I think separate. Probably separate.
Yeah, if you need to, and I'm just throwing this out on the affordable housing thing. Triangle J has done a lot of work around affordable housing. Chatham County, they got some success stories. And, if we run into a issue of finding a definition, maybe, Lee would be willing to send somebody over to, to help us, talk that out, you
That
know,
would be good.
because they are very astute because it doesn't mean the same thing to
It
everybody.
sure doesn't.
Because when you're talking about Durham, as Eric probably knows, and some of the bigger cities, their affordable housing is these, what do you want to call it? Where you get the federal money assistance and all that kind of stuff.
Section 8,
Section 8, yeah, I couldn't think of what it was.
subsidized housing.
Yeah,
Subsidized,
subsidized.
Section 8, because there's other ones out there too.
Right. So, that's a lot of what they do. We would probably be thinking more of how do you make the houses where it's more affordable for
And the
average
small homes are coming up as affordable housing. I saw a report on that recently about the miniature homes. There's another name, even in Raleigh.
Tiny homes?
No, it's not tiny homes, it's
It's a
something
different
else.
home,
Well,
but it's a different, but the concept is affordable housing. So you're right.
Right.
Modular
Should be
homes.
defined differently.
Because a lot
Modular.
of people,
It wasn't modular, I can't remember.
a lot of people connect the term to that Section 8 stuff.
To projects and government housing, you're
What
right.
did you say?
Alternative dwelling units, ADUs?
Yeah, that's it, ADUs, alternative dwelling units.
I just want to say something else in regards to what Sheila said without naming any names. It's not anybody on the board, so I don't mean it that way. Sometimes when we get emails, like we got, I only read it today, and I know it came out a couple of days ago. If you all want us to not respond, not that anybody told me that, I'm just saying that. Say something because I responded, but I CC'd you on that response. And I was very clear, and I wasn't taking sides. And I'm not saying this out of guilt, I'm just saying that I think she could have been given more information than what she was given, and that's why I directed her to whom I directed her to. So if there's something like this that's very sensitive, and it's only one-sided, so it's not that, not saying taking sides or not taking sides, but that's not something you want to, you know what I mean? You want to send that person somewhere. If you can't answer it at that moment, but you're going to get information, send that person somewhere where they can hopefully get it. And I think our representative can point them in that direction. Because you still want things like that, and you become very angry, and it's not serving anybody any good to sit there and be so mad at that situation. So that was my response. Let us know if you're going to give her, if you're going to give her or him or whomever a response, and then we won't give her a response. Not that anybody said not to. Let me say that as well. Nobody said anything.
Yeah.
So, but I'll call you on that
Yeah,
too,
I
Kelly.
I feel like a response is necessary.
Yes.
A quick response is necessary, because it's just really, I feel like it's necessary. So I respond within an hour, or so of it. And that's up to you guys, whether y'all want to additionally respond or not. That's complete up to you. But, I think we do need to get a response, and kind of go from there.
Just until you finish pulling your wires.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had one more item, bridge over the bypass. That's not saying I'm authorizing any funds, but I do think we need to have that conversation along with the Greenway stuff. I just don't want to lose that. Sorry, you go back with what you were
I think a lot of people support that, wouldn't they?
saying. Yeah, but imagine Rolesville's logo over there as you drive under, anyway.
So we had a DOT conversation Friday.
Oh, really?
Mayor and I sat down with the division engineer and reviewed it with him. And I don't want to go through the whole depth of conversation, but at the end of the day, I would say that they believe two things. One is, you're probably right, a bridge is a good idea. But an interim, something is better than nothing, is what this proposal is. So they believe the design, what is being out to bid, is safe. They said that to us.
Well, I don't think the engineer would sign off on it if he didn't think it was safe.
But they didn't disagree, but they also said they have no money for something like that and such like that, but they said, but if we think that's important, we should make sure we work through the system of Campo and all those things to get funds designated and prove their point.
I just don't want to lose sight of it with the safe alternative they want to go with first.
Yeah.
But always have the projection, kind of with the library. Yes, we want the project of the injustice, but we also like library. So I don't want to lose sight of that and go in, and next thing you know, 20 years from now, we still got that sidewalk.
I think maybe Derek and April and Paul may have enough ammunition from us to get it in that plan, so it's in that plan, you know.
Okay, good. Good,
Put it in the plan.
good, good. But I didn't mean to stop what you were saying about the other stuff. I just had that written down. I
Yes, fine.
forgot.
No problem. All right, anybody else on board? Well, thank you very much, and I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like this 6 to 9 deal. I could do this.